The wine ran red across the signature block, and Kang Suk-jin didn't move. Vivian Thorne kept the bottle steady. She had spilled it on purpose. Nobody at that table knew yet. Not the lawyers, not the men with guns in their jackets, not Baek Do-yoon, sitting across from her boss with a burgundy pocket square and a venom smile. Only she knew, and, 1 second later, so did Kang. Vivienne is black, beautiful, slender, 33 years old, 5 months as the live-in housekeeper at a Manhattan mansion that never sleeps. Fitted black dress, starched white apron, small pocket watch on a thin chain. And, inside that apron, the buried clause of a treaty that would hand her boss's shipping lanes to a rival by dawn. Kang Suk-jin, 36. They call him the Quiet One. 3-piece charcoal suit, black koi tattoo curling up the left side of his neck, heavy signet ring, voice that never rises. In his world, maids do not read papers. In his world, maids do not spill Bordeaux on treaties. That night, in his study, she said only one line. A good maid pays attention to the papers she isn't supposed to see. Kang looked at her. Really looked. For the first time in 5 months. 6 weeks later, he sneered, "You're fired," at his black maid. He expected tears. He got a half smile instead. But what she did after she walked down those stairs. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The Bordeaux was already breathing when Vivian Thorne carried it into the dining room, and every man at the long table stopped talking to watch her walk. She did not look at any of them. She looked at the wine. The bottle sat balanced on her gloved palm, the way a jeweler holds a stone that could pay for a house. Her other hand rested on the neck, 3 fingers, no pressure, only guidance. The label faced outward. That was the rule Loretta had taught her the first week. Always let the men see what they are drinking before they drink it. Let the label do the bragging so the maid does not have to speak. Vivienne did not need to speak. Her shoes made no sound on the black marble because she had learned exactly which parts of the floor were loose and which were seated, and she stepped only on the seated ones. Her fitted black dress moved with her hips instead of against them. The starched white apron caught the chandelier light on its bow, threw it soft along the wall. The little pocket watch in her apron pocket ticked against her thigh once a second, and she counted the ticks the way another woman would count breaths. 14 ticks from the service door to the head of the table. She had timed it that morning, walking the room alone before the florists came in with the white lilies. 14 was the number that let her arrive exactly as Kang Suk-jin finished the sentence he was speaking. She did not know what the sentence would be. She only knew he would be speaking when she stepped in, because he was always speaking when there were other bosses in the room, and he always stopped the second wine came near his hand. He stopped now. She felt it more than saw it. The room tightened. 12 men at the table, 6 on his side, 6 on the guest side, and then Baek Do-yoon at the far end in the burgundy pocket square, sitting like a cat that had been led into a house it did not own. All 12 men lowered their eyes to the wine and then, because they could not help it, raised them a fraction to the maid holding it. Vivienne kept her gaze on the crystal. She approached Kang from his right, angled the bottle, let a single drop kiss the bottom of the glass. She did not fill his glass. She never did. That was for the sommelier who would come out later. She was only there because he had asked for her to be there. That was the arrangement Loretta had explained on Monday. Dry as toast. Mr. Kang requests you in the dining room during service. Do not ask why. Just be there. Vivienne had not asked why. She thought she knew why. She was not sure she wanted to be right. She set the bottle down on the coaster beside his water glass, exactly where his hand would fall when he reached without looking, and stepped back 1 pace. Her hands folded at her waist, her chin lifted a half inch, her mouth rested in the small half smile that lived on her face whether she wanted it to or not. Loretta had told her once, in the pantry, that the half smile was the most dangerous thing in the house. "Girl," she had said, "you smile like you already read the ending. Stop that. Stop that in front of the wrong man." Vivienne had not stopped. The wrong man was talking again. Baek Do-yoon lifted his own glass, empty still, and tilted it toward Kang across the length of the table. His voice slid out warm and thin at the edges, the voice of a man who had rehearsed pleasantness in a mirror. "To the treaty," Baek said. In English, because the Americans on his side of the table did not speak Korean. To the peace between our houses, long may our lanes stay open. The Americans lifted their glasses. Kang's men on the other side lifted theirs a half-beat later, waiting for their boss to move first. Kang did not move. He looked at Beck. He looked at the papers stacked at his elbow. He looked, for one flicker of a second, at Vivienne. She did not meet his eyes. She had trained herself not to meet his eyes for 5 months. It was, she had discovered, the hardest thing she had ever done, and she had grown up on the west side of Baltimore washing dishes for a father who kept the belt on the same nail every night. Not meeting Kang Suk-jin's eyes was harder than that. Not meeting his eyes required the whole apparatus of her body to lock down at once. Chest, throat, jaw, the small muscles behind the ears. Because his eyes wanted to be met. That was the trap. He did not look at her the way the other men in the house looked at her. He looked at her the way a chess player looks at a piece he cannot afford to lose but keeps, on purpose, in the middle of the board. She stepped back another pace. She reached the service wall. She pressed her spine to the cold plaster and let her eyes travel, at last, to the treaty pages spread out between the two bosses. The pages were thick, cream stock. Kang's family crest embossed dry in the upper left of every sheet, a small tiger with its tail curling under. Baek's crest on the upper right, a crane with folded wings. Between them, in dense 2-column English with a Korean parallel translation running down the middle gutter, the routing clauses. Vivienne had read them. She had read them the night before, when Han Ji-woo left the study for 11 minutes to take a call in the garden, and the papers sat open on the desk under the green banker's lamp, and she had gone in to bring the coffee and stayed, on her feet, 3 of those 11 minutes, reading. She had not intended to read. She had intended to bring the coffee. She had set the tray down. She had turned to leave. And then the phrase in Section 4, Subsection 3, Item 11, had caught her eye, the way a fish hook catches a lip. Bilateral concessionary routing under emergency contingency. 9 words that were doing more work than 9 words should ever be asked to do. She had leaned. She had read the sentence twice. She had read the sentence 3 times. She had set her jaw and read the whole subsection. And then she had walked out of the study with the empty coffee cup in her hand, and her heart beating so hard she thought the pocket watch would speak. Now, standing against the service wall while 12 men debated the price of peace, Vivienne watched Kang's right hand hover above the correct page, and knew, with the calm total certainty that came to her sometimes when the world made itself simple, that if he signed the paper under his hand, he would lose everything by the end of the year. Not tomorrow. Not next month. By the end of the year, the shipping lanes his grandfather had bled for would belong, quietly, on paper, in a language nobody in this room except her seemed to want to read carefully, to Baek Do-yoon. She looked at Kang's hand. She looked at the Bordeaux she had just set down. She thought about her sister. Trinity was 19. Trinity was in her sophomore year at Howard, second semester, chemistry major, and Trinity did not know that the tuition for spring was sitting in a mason jar under the 3rd floorboard from the window in the servant room on the top floor of this mansion, wrapped in a plastic freezer bag against damp. Trinity did not know that her big sister had taken a live-in job with a Korean Mafia boss because live-in meant no rent, and no rent meant $3,000 a month straight to a Howard bursar. Trinity thought Vivienne worked for a hedge fund executive. Trinity thought her big sister filed paperwork, which, in a manner of speaking, was true. If Kang signed the paper, Vivienne kept her job for a few more weeks, maybe a month, until the empire started to shed staff. If she stopped him from signing, she kept her job for as long as she wanted it. Or she lost it in the next 10 seconds and walked out of the mansion tonight with $240 in her apron pocket and a mason jar she would not be able to go back for. She did the math on Trinity's next tuition installment. She did the math on the price of the Bordeaux. She stepped forward. She did not think about it. Her body simply took the step. Loretta, who was standing at the sideboard pretending to arrange the second course, saw the step and stopped breathing. Vivienne saw Loretta stop breathing in her peripheral vision and did not turn her head. She reached the corner of the table. She bent, at the waist, the small polite bend of a maid clearing crumbs from a linen. Her fingertips brushed the base of the wine bottle she had set down 40 seconds ago. She lifted it, half an inch, the way a woman lifts a vase to slide a coaster underneath. The bottle tipped. It tipped because she tipped it. She tipped it because she had decided to tip it. But the tipping, to everyone else in the room, looked like the small, unlucky flinch of a servant startled by a man's sudden gesture, and she had timed it, precisely, to the small, unlucky flinch of Baek Do-yoon lifting his empty glass a second time for emphasis, so that every eye at the table went to Baek's hand and then, only then, snapped back to hers. The Bordeaux poured out. It poured out in a slow ribbon of dark red across the treaty page under Kang's hovering pen, across the exact block where his signature would go, across the parallel Korean translation, across the tiger crest in the upper left, across 3 cream sheets in a single elegant arc that a wine steward could not have replicated with a full afternoon of practice. The pen dropped from Kang's fingers. Nobody spoke. Vivienne straightened. She held the empty bottle at her side. Her face did not change. Her mouth kept the half smile. Her eyes went, at last, to Kang. She met his eyes. They were very still, deep-set, cold dark brown, a single flick of the eyelid the only movement in them. He was not looking at the wine. He was looking at her. He was looking at her the way a chess player looks at the piece that has just moved itself. She curtsied. The curtsy was small, correct, trained. Loretta had drilled her on it for a full week of evenings, said in this house you do not bow, you curtsy, because that is what old Mr. Kang preferred, and old Mr. Kang is still on the wall and still watching. Vivienne curtsied now the way she had been drilled, one knee bending exactly 2 inches behind the other, chin dipping a fraction, hands folded at the apron. "Forgive me, sir," she said. Her voice was low and even, and did not tremble. "I will bring another decanter." Kang did not answer. Baek Do-yoon, at the far end of the table, began to laugh. It was a small laugh, cultivated. He laughed the way a man laughs when he wants a room to know he is amused and generous and above such small inconveniences. He set his glass down. He spread his hands. "An accident," Baek said, in English, and then, sliding into Korean for Kang, added a phrase Vivienne did not understand fully, but caught the shape of, something about God and small mercies and the price of good wine. Gang's men laughed a beat late. Gang did not laugh. He looked at Vivienne one moment longer, then he looked at the ruined treaty. Then he looked at Han Ji-woo, who had materialized at his elbow the way Han always materialized, silent as weather. "Recess," Kang said, in English, for the guests. 15 minutes. My apologies to our friends. Fresh copies will be brought. Han will show you to the terrace." The men rose. Baek rose last, slow, still smiling, and as he passed the corner of the table where Vivienne stood with the empty bottle, he let his eyes drag down the line of her body once and then back up, unhurried, the smile never moving. She did not look at him. She was already turning toward Loretta at the sideboard, already reaching for the linen to wipe the neck of the bottle, already speaking the small correct phrase about apologizing to the head steward for the loss of a $2,000 vintage. Loretta took the bottle from her hand. Loretta's fingers were shaking. "Girl," Loretta said under her breath, into the collar of her gray dress so no lip reader could catch it. "Girl, what have you done?" "My job," Vivienne said. She walked out of the dining room through the service door. She did not look back. The service corridor was cold. It ran behind the walls of the great rooms, narrow, lit by wall sconces every 4 feet, tiled in the pale gray stone the architect had chosen 100 years ago because it was easy to wash blood off. Vivienne walked its length with her hands folded again at her waist. Her breath came out white in the cold. Her heart was so loud she could hear it in her teeth. She kept walking. She reached the pantry. She stepped inside. She closed the door. She leaned her forehead against the shelf where the salt canisters lived, and she stayed there, for 1 count of 4, breathing. Then she pushed off the shelf and went to the second decanter and lifted it and inspected the seal and set it on the silver tray and went back into the corridor with the tray held perfectly level, and she walked back through the service door into the dining room where the ruined pages had already been cleared and Loretta was laying fresh cream stock down along the length of the table, and she set the fresh decanter at Kang's place, and she stepped back, and she waited. The men came back in from the terrace. They were quieter now. Baek was still smiling. Kang was not. Kang sat. He did not look at the wine. He did not look at Vivienne. He looked at the fresh pages and he read them, this time with the small, pale gold reading glasses that he never wore in front of guests but had, tonight, taken from his inner jacket pocket and set on the bridge of his nose without explanation. He read the first page. He read the second. When he reached the third page, section 4, subsection 3, he stopped. He turned the page over. He turned it back. He read the subsection twice. He set the glasses down. He looked, for the first time since the wine had spilled, at Vivienne. She looked back. The exchange took a second and a half. Nobody at the table caught it. Only Loretta at the sideboard caught it, and Han Ji-woo behind Kang's chair, and Han's eyes narrowed the way a man's eyes narrow when he is realizing, 10 minutes too late, that a room he thought he understood has been playing a different game the whole time. Kang closed the folder. "We will reconvene tomorrow," he said. "The clause on emergency routing requires review by council. Mr. Hollis will circulate a revised draft by 9 in the morning. Gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Dinner will be served." Baek's smile went thin. For 1 second, less than 1 second, the venom under it showed. Then the smile came back, and Baek was on his feet again, and Baek was murmuring gracious things about counsel and prudence and how good it was to have partners who read carefully, and Baek was letting his eyes travel, one more time, over the maid in the corner. This time she looked at him. She held his gaze exactly 1 second longer than a maid should. Her half-smile did not move. Then she dropped her eyes and reached for the water pitcher and moved down the line filling glasses, and Baek watched her go, and something in Baek's face that had been smooth all evening rearranged itself in a way Vivienne did not see but Han did. Dinner was served. Dinner ran 2 hours. Vivienne did not speak again. She served 3 courses. She cleared. She brought coffee. She brought a second coffee for Kang, who never took a second coffee. She brought a small brandy for Baek, who accepted it with a nod and did not drink it. She kept her breathing even. She kept her hands steady. She kept the half-smile off her mouth because the half-smile, tonight, had become the most expensive thing she owned, and she was not going to spend it a second time. At 11:40 the guests left. Baek was the last to leave. He paused in the front hall while his driver brought the car, and he turned, and he looked back at the marble staircase where Vivienne was standing at the top landing with an armful of table linens, because she had chosen that route deliberately, chosen the visible route, chosen to be seen, and Baek nodded at her once, small and slow, and Vivienne did not nod back. The door closed. The house went quiet. Han Ji-woo came up the stairs 3 at a time, black boots silent on the runner, and he stopped 1 step below her landing and he said, low, without looking at her, "Mr. Kang wants you in the study." Vivienne did not answer. She handed the linens to the passing undermaid, and she turned, and she walked down the corridor to the study door, and she stopped in front of it, and she smoothed her apron once with both hands, and she knocked. "Come." She opened the door. The study was dark except for the green banker's lamp on the desk and the low fire in the grate. Kang stood at the window with his back to her, jacket off, sleeves rolled once, the koi tattoo dark and fine along the left side of his neck above the collar of the crisp white shirt. He did not turn. "Close the door." She closed it. "Come in." She came in. She crossed the carpet to the edge of the desk and stopped. She did not sit. He had not offered. He turned. He looked at her a long time. "You spilled the wine," he said. "Yes, sir. On purpose." She did not answer. He walked to the desk. He picked up the ruined page which he had, apparently, kept, folded once, in his breast pocket. He laid it out on the blotter. The wine had dried dark, almost black, over the signature block and over the crest and over the parallel Korean. "Section 4, he said. "Subsection 3, item 11. "Yes, sir." "You read it." "Yes, sir." "When?" "Last night, when I brought the coffee. You were on the phone in the garden. It was open on the desk. I read it 3 times. He was very still. "And what did you read?" She kept her hands folded at her waist. She kept her chin at the correct half-inch. Her voice stayed low and even. She said the words she had been rehearsing since the moment she had lifted the bottle. "I read a bilateral concessionary routing clause under emergency contingency," she said, "that defines emergency, in the Korean parallel, as any interruption of maritime transit exceeding 72 hours, and that transfers, under such definition, the full operational authority of the affected lane to the counterparty for the duration of the contingency, with no reversion clause specified. And I read, on page 7, that Mr. Beck's house has been recorded as the counterparty of default for all 3 of your Pacific lanes. And I read, on page 9, that the arbitration venue for any dispute arising from the contingency is Busan, under a judge whose name appears twice in Mr. Beck's political contribution filings. I do not know maritime law. I know how to read a contract. That is not a treaty. That is a slow transfer. Kang did not move. He looked at her for what felt like a very long time. His face did not change. His deep-set eyes did not blink. The fire in the grate popped once, small. "Where," he said, "did a housemaid learn to read a contract?" She kept her eyes on his. She said, quiet, the half-smile touching the corner of her mouth for the first time in an hour. "A good maid pays attention to the papers she isn't supposed to see, sir." The air in the room changed. It changed the way air changes in a room where a door somewhere far off has been opened onto a garden. Nothing visible moved. Nothing audible shifted. But the pressure on the skin was different, and Vivian felt it on her forearms and along the back of her neck under the fine, tight braids, and she knew, with the same total, simple certainty she had known at the table, that he had just seen her for the first time in 5 months. Not the maid. Her. Kang Suk-jin, the quiet one, heir to a syndicate that ran a quarter of Manhattan Koreatown, put both his large veined hands flat on the desk between them and lowered his head half an inch, and he looked at her from under his brow, and he said, in a voice so low it barely reached her, "Miss Thorne." She had never heard him say her name. He had never, in 5 months, said her name. She held herself very still. "Sir, sit down." She did not sit down. "I would prefer to stand, sir." He almost smiled. It did not quite reach his mouth. It moved, once, at the corner of the eye, and was gone. "As you wish." He straightened. He walked around the desk. He stopped 1 pace from her, close enough that she could see the single small scale of the koi tattoo catch the lamplight above his collar, close enough that she could smell the faint, clean scent of the starch in his shirt. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "Mr. Hollis will draft a revised clause. You will read it before he sends it. If any part of it is wrong, you will tell me. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Your duties in this house do not change. You remain in service. Loretta remains your supervisor. This conversation does not exist. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Miss Thorne." "Sir." He looked at her one more moment. His eyes were not cold now. They were something else. She did not have a word for what they were. "Thank you," he said. She curtsied. "Good night, sir." She turned. She walked to the door. Her hand reached the handle. She paused, half a breath, because the pocket watch in her apron had begun to tick against her thigh again, and she wanted to be sure her voice was even before she spoke. She spoke without turning. "Sir." "Miss Thorne. The Bordeaux was a Chateau Margaux 1998. The sommelier will bill the loss to my wages. I would prefer that arrangement." There was a silence. Then, from behind her, very low, almost amused, "The Bordeaux is on the house." She opened the door and stepped through and closed it behind her. She walked the length of the corridor to the servants' stair. She climbed 3 flights. She reached the top landing where her small room waited under the eaves. She went inside. She closed the door. She stood in the dark for a long moment with her back against it. Then she crossed to the bed, and she knelt, and she pried up the 3rd floorboard from the window, and she counted the money in the mason jar by the pale spill of streetlight from the dormer window. $3,140. Trinity's spring tuition, less the last installment, plus a week's cushion. She put the jar back. She fitted the board down. She sat on the edge of the bed and she unlaced the low black leather shoes and she set them side by side under the bed frame, and she stripped off the sheer black stockings, and she folded the fitted black dress across the chair, and she laid the crisp white apron over the dress with the bow arranged neatly, and she sat in her slip in the dark, and she pressed both hands flat to her face. She did not cry. She had not cried in a long time. She sat that way for a full minute. Then she stood, and she crossed to the little window, and she looked down at the courtyard where Kang's black car sat in the wash of the security lamp, and she watched the study window on the second floor, where the green banker's lamp was still burning, and she saw, once, the tall shape of him cross behind the drape and stop, and stand there, and look up. He could not see her. The window she stood at was dark, but he stood there, at his window, and he looked up at the servants' floor for a long time, and Vivian watched him look, and the pocket watch on the chair ticked once a second in the dark, and she thought, very quiet, the sentence she had been trying not to think for 5 months. He has begun to look. She let the curtain fall. She turned from the window. She went to bed. Kang Suk-jin was awake before the first light touched the garden. He sat at the desk in his study, the ruined contract spread in front of him, the wine stain now dried into the color of old rust. He had not slept. The pocket watch on the corner of the desk ticked in a rhythm that felt, for the first time in years, louder than his own thoughts. Han Ji-woo knocked once and entered. He carried the morning report in a leather folder and set it down without speaking. He waited. "The maid," Kang said. He did not lift his eyes from the paper. "Vivienne Thorne, 5 months. References verified. Background clean. Verified by whom?" Han Ji-woo paused. "By me, sir." "Verify again." Han Ji-woo left. Kang picked up the pocket watch. It was warm from the light. He turned it in his palm and set it down beside the folded newspaper. The clause was still there in his memory, word for word. The routing language, the buried transfer of the shipping lanes. He had almost signed it. He had held the pen. He put the pen back in the drawer. Downstairs, Vivian was already moving through the breakfast setup as if the previous night had happened to someone else. She polished the silver toast rack. She straightened the linen napkins. Loretta Whitfield watched her from the pantry door with the expression of a woman who had learned not to ask questions until she had first made coffee. "Miss Thorne." "Ma'am, coffee's ready." "Thank you, ma'am." Loretta poured 2 cups. She set one on the pantry counter and pushed it toward Vivienne. She did not sit. "Mr. Kang wants to see you at 9. Vivienne inclined her head. She lifted the cup. Her hand was steady. "Miss Thorne." "Yes, ma'am." Loretta looked at her over the reading glasses. "Whatever you did last night, do it slower today." "Yes, ma'am." At 9, Vivian climbed the main staircase carrying a fresh pot of coffee on a silver tray. She wore the black dress, the crisp apron, the low leather shoes. The pocket watch weighed against her hip. She knocked twice on the study door and entered without waiting. Kang was behind the desk. Edward Hollis, the senior attorney with the bow tie and the tortoise-shell glasses, sat in the leather chair across from him, with the briefcase closed on his lap. Han Ji-woo stood at the window. None of them spoke when she came in. She poured the coffee. She set the pot on the warmer. She turned to leave. "Miss Thorne." She stopped. She did not turn around. "Sit." She turned. There was no 4th chair. She waited. Kang looked at Hollis. Hollis stood. Hollis carried the leather chair across the rug, placed it beside the desk facing Kang, and returned to lean against the bookshelf. Han Ji-woo did not move from the window. Vivian sat. She kept her hands folded in her lap. The apron was smooth over her knees. "The contract," Kang said. He did not look at her. He looked at the stained page in front of him. "Explain it." "Sir? Explain what you saw." She lifted her eyes. She held his for 1 full second before she spoke. Section 14, subsection C. The routing clause folded into the tonnage schedule. It moves the Brooklyn dock and the Bayonne warehouse from your control to a holding company registered in Delaware. The holding company is a subsidiary of a shell owned by Baek Do-yoon's cousin's wife. The transfer would not have shown up in the audit for 11 months. By then, the lanes would already have been reflagged and the contracts renewed under his name. Hollis lowered the briefcase from his lap. Kang did not move. "Who taught you to read this?" "I taught myself, sir." "Where?" "A public library, then a paralegal correspondence course, then 5 years reading contracts for a Harlem legal aid clinic on Saturdays." "Why?" She held the coffee tray on her knees. She looked at the pocket watch chain against her apron. "Because my sister is in college and I pay for it in cash. And because when I was 17, a man in a suit put a page in front of my mother and told her to sign it. She signed it. She lost the house. I promised myself I would learn to read every page." The room did not move. Hollis set the briefcase on the floor. Kang looked at her then. Not at the apron, not at the pocket watch, at her face. Miss Thorne. Sir, you will continue your duties in this house. You will report to me, personally, any document that enters or leaves this study. You will speak to no one, including Mrs. Whitfield, about what you read. Your salary is doubled starting today. Mr. Hollis will draw up the papers. She said nothing. Do you accept? I accept, sir. You may go. She stood. She lifted the empty tray. She walked to the door. Her hand was on the brass handle when he spoke again. Miss Thorne. She turned. Kang was looking at the ruined page on the desk, not at her. Thank you, sir. She closed the door behind her. Han Ji-woo turned from the window. Hollis picked up the briefcase. Neither of them spoke. Kang refilled his own coffee. He drank it black. The 6 weeks that followed did not have a name. Later, when Vivian tried to describe them to herself, she found she did not have the words. The house did not change. The routines did not change. The breakfast tray at 7, the study coffee at 9, the linen count at 11, the boot brushing at 3, the treaty visitors at 7, the last hallway sweep at midnight. All of it went on as before. What changed was the air. There was a folder that appeared on the corner of the study desk at 9:15 each morning. It was always there when she came in with the coffee. She would set the tray, she would leave, and when she returned at 10 to collect the empty cup, she would find the folder in the pocket of her apron. She read it in the linen room during the 11 o'clock count. She marked the clauses with a pencil she kept behind her ear. She placed the folder back on the corner of the desk at 3, under the boot brush cloth. By 6 it was gone. Kang never mentioned the folders. She never mentioned them either. There was a morning when he handed her a coffee cup and their fingers brushed on the porcelain. Neither of them looked at the other. She took the cup. He turned away. Nothing was said. But the cup was warmer than it should have been, because he had held it a second too long before letting go. There was an evening when Baek Do-yoon's people telephoned the house to reschedule the next round of the treaty. Han Ji-woo answered. He spoke for 3 minutes. He hung up. He walked to the study to report to Kang. Vivian was already there, refilling the water pitcher. She did not leave. Han Ji-woo hesitated. Kang did not look up. Speak. Han Ji-woo spoke. Vivian did not turn her head. She listened to every word while she polished the pitcher. When Han Ji-woo was gone, Kang put down his pen. Miss Thorne. Sir. Your assessment. She set the pitcher down. She smoothed her apron. They are moving the meeting to a location Beck controls, because they want you to arrive as a guest, not a host. If you arrive as a guest, they will offer the papers before dinner, when you are still standing, and they will read the clause about the Bayonne flag transfer aloud in a room full of witnesses. You will look weak refusing in front of your own lieutenants. You will look weaker signing. The location must change. To where? Here. They will refuse. Then insist. They need this treaty more than you do. Beck has 3 ships stuck in customs in Long Beach with cargo he cannot claim. He needs your customs contact. Insist. Kang looked at her for a long moment. How do you know about the ships in Long Beach? Mrs. Whitfield's nephew works customs, sir. He mentioned it at Sunday dinner 2 weeks ago. I remembered. You remembered. I remembered, sir. He turned back to his papers. She lifted the pitcher and left. That night at 3 in the morning, she heard footsteps in the hallway outside her small room in the servants' wing. She did not open her door. The footsteps stopped. They stood for a long moment. Then they walked away. In the morning, there was a folded piece of paper under her door. It had one line. The meeting will be here, thank you. No signature. She did not need one. She burned the paper in the servants' fireplace before Loretta came down. There was a Thursday when she was walking down the second-floor hallway with a stack of pressed shirts, and she came around the corner and Kang was standing there. He had removed his jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled once. The koi tattoo on his neck was fully visible above the open collar. He was reading a page. He looked up when she came around the corner. Neither of them moved. She stood with the shirts. He stood with the page. The hallway was very quiet. Somewhere in the house, Loretta was giving instructions in the kitchen. Neither of them heard it. He stepped aside to let her pass. She passed. Her shoulder did not brush his shoulder, but it was close enough that if either of them had breathed differently, it would have. She walked to the linen room. She put the shirts down. She stood at the window for a moment with her hand pressed flat against the glass. Then she went back to work. There was a Saturday when Kang came down to the kitchen. He had never been in the kitchen. He walked through the pantry without a jacket, in his shirt sleeves, and stopped at the long wooden table where Loretta and Vivienne were arranging the flowers for the Sunday dinner. Loretta stopped what she was doing. Vivienne did not. Mrs. Whitfield. Sir, I'd like coffee here, if it is not an inconvenience. Loretta looked at Vivienne. Vivienne kept her eyes on the flowers. Loretta poured the coffee, set it on the table, and quietly left the room. Kang sat. Vivienne cut the stem of a white lily on a diagonal and slid it into the vase. Miss Thorne. Sir, I do not know what to call this. She placed a second lily. Then don't call it anything, sir. He drank his coffee. She placed a third lily. You do this well. I do everything well, sir. He set the cup down. He almost smiled. He did not quite smile. Yes, you do. She looked up then. She met his eyes. For 1 second, the maid and the mafia boss looked at each other across a kitchen table full of white lilies, and neither of them was maid or mafia boss. They were only two people who had, over 6 weeks of unspoken folders and brushed fingers and 1-second glances in hallways, built a country inside a country. It had no borders and no name. It existed only in the space between his coffee cup and her flowers. Then Loretta walked back in, and it was gone. Mr. Kang, sir. Mr. Hollis is on the telephone. Thank you, Mrs. Whitfield. He rose. He looked at Vivienne once more. Miss Thorne. Sir. He left. Loretta poured herself a cup of coffee. She sat down across from Vivienne. She did not speak for a long minute. She watched Vivienne cut the diagonal on a fourth lily. Miss Thorne. Ma'am. How old are you? 33, ma'am. Loretta drank her coffee. I was 33 once. In this house. Working for his grandfather. Vivienne placed the fourth lily. There was a young man then. Not Korean, Irish. Drove the car. He looked at me across the kitchen the way Mr. Kang just looked at you. Vivienne cut a fifth lily on the diagonal. What happened, ma'am? Loretta finished her coffee. She stood. She smoothed her apron. They put him on a boat back to Belfast. I never saw him again. I stayed. I became head governess. I own a small house in Queens now. I am respected in this house and in my church. I have had a good life, Miss Thorne. A very good life. She set the empty cup in the sink. But it was not the life I would have chosen. She left the kitchen. Vivienne stood at the table with the 5 lilies. She placed the 6th. She placed the 7th. Her hand did not shake. She thought about the pocket watch under her mattress. She thought about her sister's tuition. She thought about the 6 weeks of silent folders. She thought about the country inside the country. She thought about the boat back to Belfast. She placed the 8th lily, then the 9th. By evening, the arrangement was finished. It was flawless. The rescheduled treaty dinner arrived on a Wednesday. Baek Do-yoon walked into the mansion at 7 precisely, flanked by Cho Min-suk on his right and Ryu Kwan on his left. The bleached blonde enforcer looked around the entrance hall as if pricing the chandeliers. The wiry one cracked his knuckles once against his palm and stared at the polished floor. Baek smiled his thin, venom smile. The old scar on his cheekbone caught the light. Sok Jin, beautiful home, beautiful as always. Do-yoon, welcome. They embraced. Neither of them meant it. The dinner unfolded through the same rituals as the first. The same table, the same order of dishes. Vivienne moved through the room with the same silent mastery, refilling water glasses, replacing napkins, adjusting the placement of the salt cellars by half an inch when Baek's elbow shifted them. Kang did not look at her. She did not look at him. The pocket watch ticked against her hip. The wine was decanted at 8:40. She served Kang first. She served Baek second. She served the lieutenants in order of seniority. She kept the bottle on the sideboard. She did not spill a drop. At 9:15, Baek slid the new folder across the table. The revised terms. I think you will find them acceptable, Seokjin. Much cleaner than the last draft, no? Kang opened the folder. He turned to the 3rd page. He read for a long moment. He did not look at Vivienne. He did not need to. Do-yoon. Yes. This clause. Page 3. Section 9, subsection B. Yes. The word exclusive. Between transport and rights. Beck's smile did not change. Standard language Sokjin, boilerplate. It is not boilerplate. In combination with the tonnage table on page 11, the word exclusive hands you the Long Beach clearance protocol for 18 months. Your 3 ships stuck in customs would move on the first day. Mine would not move at all. The room went very still. Beck's smile widened by exactly 1 millimeter. Sok-jin, where did you learn to read a contract like that? Kang closed the folder. I have been paying attention. Beck laughed. It was a small, dry laugh. He looked around the table. His eyes stopped on Vivian, standing at the sideboard with the wine bottle in her hand. He looked at her for a full 3 seconds. Then he looked back at Kang. Well, perhaps we should adjust the language. Perhaps. The dinner continued. The clause was rewritten by hand at the table. Hollis initialed each revision. The signatures were held for the following week. Bakewit departed at 10:40, embracing Kang at the door with the same lack of meaning. Chominsok did not embrace Kang. He looked at Vivian once as he passed her in the hallway. He held her eyes. He said nothing. Ryukwan cracked his knuckles once against the doorframe on his way out. The door closed. The mansion exhaled. Han Ji-woo bolted the door. Hollis carried the folder to the study. Kang stood in the entrance hall for a long moment, looking at the closed door. Then he turned and walked past Vivian without a word and climbed the main staircase. She waited until the study door closed above her. Then she went to the kitchen and washed the wine glasses by hand. 2 weeks passed. The revised treaty was drafted, redrafted, drafted again. Vivian read every version in the linen room during the 11 o'clock count. She marked each buried clause with the pencil behind her ear. Twice she folded a small note under the boot brush cloth. Twice the note was gone by 6. Kang stopped signing anything without waiting. Beck noticed. Beck came back on a Friday, alone this time, without the enforcers, without the lieutenants. He asked for a private word with Kang. He was received in the study. Vivian brought the coffee. She set the tray. She turned to leave. Miss Thorne, Bakek's voice, not Kang's. She stopped. She turned. Beck was sitting in the leather chair, the coffee cup cradled between his palms. His thin lips were curved in the venom smile. His small dark eyes were fixed on her face. Kang did not move. Miss Thorne, please, sit. She did not sit. She looked at Kang. Kang looked at Baek. Do Yoon, she is staff. She is staff, yes, of course she is staff. Baek turned the coffee cup in his hands. But I would like her to sit, as a courtesy to me. Would that be agreeable, Suk-jin? The air in the study did not move. Kang looked at Vivian. For the first time in 6 weeks, he did not know what to say. She saw it in his face. The country inside the country cracked. One small hairline, right down the middle. She saw him look for the words. She saw him not find them. Beck watched. Beck smiled wider. Sok-jin, you do not object, do you? It is only a chair. It is only a cup of coffee. Kang said, very quietly, Miss Thorne, please, sit. She did not sit in the 4th chair. There was no 4th chair. She stood beside the leather chair, her hands folded at her apron. The empty tray held flat against her thigh. She did not look at Baek. She did not look at Kang. Baek set his coffee cup on the small table beside him. He crossed his legs. He looked at her the way a man looks at a horse he is thinking of buying. Miss Thorne, what is your surname? Thorne, sir. Thorne, beautiful, English? I do not know, sir. How long have you been with Mr. Kang? 5 months, sir, and 2 weeks. 5 months and 2 weeks. And already so trusted. You served the wine, I remember. The night of the first draft, the spill. Yes, sir. An unfortunate accident. Yes, sir. Beck smiled at Kang. Seok-jin, she is remarkable. She is truly remarkable. Kang did not answer. Beck turned back to Vivian. Miss Thorne, next Wednesday I am hosting a small dinner at my home. Very small, 12 people. I would like you to be one of them. Not to serve, to sit. At my table. To my right. The pocket watch ticked once against her hip. She did not answer. She looked at Kang. Kang did not look at her. He was looking at the closed folder on his desk. Beck waited. He waited a very long moment. Then he uncrossed his legs. He rose. He picked up his coffee cup and set it back on the tray she was holding. "Think about it, Miss Thorne. Please, think about it." He turned to Kang. "Sok Jin, thank you for the coffee. We will speak Monday." He walked to the door. He paused. He turned back. "Oh, Sok Jin, one small thing. In your house, I noticed. The maid stands behind your chair, does she not? At dinner, behind your chair." "Yes." "Interesting. In my house, the maid sits in the kitchen. In your house, she stands behind the chair." Beck smiled the venom smile. One might almost say she is closer to the master than the lieutenants. He left. The door closed. The study was very quiet. Vivian stood beside the leather chair with the tray in her hand. She did not move. Kang sat behind the desk. He did not move either. For a long minute, neither of them looked at the other. Then Kang lifted his eyes. She was already looking at him. Her face was calm. The half-smile was there, faint, the natural resting shape of her mouth. But her eyes were not calm. Her eyes were saying very clearly, without any word being spoken, "You did not answer him. You should have answered him." Kang saw it. He held her gaze. He did not speak. She waited. He did not speak. She inclined her head. She lifted the tray. She turned to the door. Her hand was on the brass handle when he finally spoke. "Miss Thorne." She did not turn. "Sir, you will not accept his invitation." She waited a moment before she answered. When she did, her voice was very quiet. "I would never have accepted it, sir." "Good. But it was not for you to decide, sir." The pocket watch ticked once. "Sir." She opened the door. She went out. She closed it behind her. Kang sat alone in the study. He looked at the coffee cup Bake had set on the small table. He looked at the folder on his desk. He looked at the pen in the drawer. He understood, then, with a clarity that arrived like a slow, cold wave rising through his chest, that the treaty was not the game. It had never been the game. The game was that a man of his power had, in front of his rival, in front of his own house, been unable to find a single word to defend the woman who read every page he could not read. And the rival had seen it, and the rival was going to use it. He rose from the desk. He walked to the window. He looked down at the garden. Vivian was crossing the courtyard toward the servants' wing, the tray tucked under her arm, her back straight, her steps even. She did not look up. She did not know he was watching. He stood at the window for a long time. He did not know it yet, but the country inside the country had just been named, and the name was written not in his handwriting but in hers. Downstairs, in the small servants' room, Vivian set the tray on the dresser. She sat on the edge of the bed. She took the pocket watch from her apron pocket and set it on the pillow beside her. She thought of Bake's venom smile. She thought of the empty second where Kang had not spoken. She thought of Loretta's boat back to Belfast. She reached under the mattress and touched the envelope of cash. She had, she calculated, enough for 6 months. 6 months of a small apartment in Koreatown. 6 months of a rented storefront. 6 months of reading contracts for people who could not read them alone. She put the envelope back. She did not know it yet, but she had just decided. She lay back on the bed with the pocket watch beside her. The ceiling above her had a small crack in the plaster near the light fixture. She had noticed it her first week in the house. She had never mentioned it. Loretta had never fixed it. Nobody in the mansion looked up. She thought of the way Bake had said the word sit, soft, almost polite. The way a man says a word when he has already decided who owns it. She thought of the way Kang had said, "Miss Thorne, please, sit." The 2-second pause between please and sit. The pause was where she lived now. The pause was the room she had to leave. She closed her hand around the pocket watch. The metal was warm from her body. Upstairs in the study, Kang was still standing at the window. He had not moved. Somewhere in the mansion a clock struck the hour. He did not count the strokes. She waited for the next bell. Morning came without ceremony. The mansion staff moved through the halls in the pale gray light before dawn, and Vivian Thorne was among them. Apron crisp, hair pinned in the same asymmetric shape it always held, curls falling forward on the left, tight fine braids running back on the right. She carried a tray of polished silver into the small east dining room, where Kang Sok-jin took his coffee alone at 7. She set the tray down. She poured the coffee. She did not look at his face. She did not need to. She could feel the weight of his attention on the top of her head, like a hand that had not yet decided whether to rest or to lift away. There was a document on the table beside his plate, a single manila folder, closed. She had not put it there. Loretta had not put it there. It had appeared between the moment she left the pantry and the moment she reached the sideboard. She understood without being told that it had been placed there for her. She set the silver coffee pot down. She adjusted the small pocket watch in her apron pocket. She turned to leave the room. Miss Thorne. His voice was low. It was always low. She stopped at the doorway. Yes, sir. The room is cold. See that a fire is laid this afternoon. Yes, sir. She left. She walked down the corridor at the same pace she always walked. She did not look back. In the servants' hall, she folded her hands in front of her apron for exactly 3 seconds and let out one slow breath through her nose. Then she went to fetch the kindling for the east dining room fire. When she returned 2 hours later with the wood cradle balanced against her hip, the folder was gone. In its place, tucked between the corner of the tablecloth and the base of a crystal decanter, was a single sheet of paper, not a page from the folder. A blank page. On it, in a hand she recognized from the signature on the wine-ruined treaty, was a single line of English. I do not know your first name. She read it twice. She laid the fire. She swept the hearth. She lit the kindling with a long match and watched the flame catch. When the fire was steady, she picked up the sheet of paper, folded it once, and slid it into the pocket of her apron behind the pocket watch. She carried the empty wood cradle back to the pantry. At the servants' table at noon, Loretta poured her tea and studied her face without appearing to. Something on your mind, girl? No, ma'am. Loretta let it lie. That was one of the reasons Vivian loved her. That night, in her small room at the end of the third-floor corridor, Vivian lit a single lamp and sat at the writing desk. She took out the folded sheet of paper. She smoothed it flat with the side of her hand. She took a fresh sheet of the mansion's cream stationery from the drawer, dipped a pen, and wrote below his line, in a hand as clean and unhurried as the one above. Vivienne. She did not sign it. She folded the sheet, walked down the back stairs in her stockings, crossed the servants' corridor, and slid the folded paper under the door of the east dining room, exactly where the tablecloth would hide it from anyone who was not looking for it. She went back up the stairs. She got into bed. She lay in the dark with her eyes open until the mansion's old timbers stopped creaking, and then she slept. In the morning, the sheet was gone. That was the first week. The second week began with a stack of contracts on the credenza in the study, tied with a piece of black grosgrain ribbon. She was polishing the brass fittings on the window latches when Kang walked past the credenza, paused, looked at the stack, and said, without turning his head, "These need to be filed by Friday. Mr. Hollis will collect them." "Yes, sir." He left. She finished the window latches. She carried her cloth and her tin of polish into the servants' corridor and put them away. She washed her hands. She returned to the study. She untied the black ribbon. She sat in the low chair by the window where the light was best, and she read. The first contract was clean. The second contract was clean. The third contract had a subclause on the fourth page that shifted arbitration from New York to Busan and quietly stripped Kang of his right to challenge damages in United States court. She read it 3 times to be certain. She took a pencil from the drawer of the small side table and made a light tick in the margin, no larger than the head of a pin, next to the offending line. She retied the ribbon. She put the stack back on the credenza in the same position she had found it. On Friday morning, when Edward Hollis arrived in his navy pinstripe and burgundy bow tie, Kang met him in the study. Vivian was in the corridor with a cloth and a bottle of lemon oil, polishing the wainscoting. She did not need to hear what was said. She could see through the crack of the door that Hollis had opened the third contract to the fourth page and was staring at it, and that Kang was standing at the window with his back to the room and his hands folded behind him, and that neither man was speaking. Hollis left 20 minutes later carrying the folder. He was frowning. His briefcase looked heavier than when he had come in. Vivian moved down the wainscoting one panel at a time. That afternoon, when she brought the tea into the study at 4 o'clock, Kang was at his desk. He did not look up from the ledger he was writing in. Miss Thorne. Yes, sir. The tick in the margin was a pencil. Yes, sir. Erase it before you return the contract to the credenza in the future. Yes, sir. Thank you. She set the tea tray down. She turned to leave. Miss Thorne. She stopped. Where did you learn to read a document like that? She stood very still. She looked at the door in front of her, at the polished brass of the handle, at the reflection of her own eyes in the brass, small and dark and calm. On my own, sir. On your own? Yes, sir. How many years? 11, sir. Since I was 22. And nobody has ever paid you for it? No, sir. The silence in the room lengthened. She did not turn around. She waited. Thank you, Miss Thorne. That will be all. Yes, sir. She left. In the corridor, she did not stop walking until she reached the servants' stairs, and she did not stop on the stairs until she reached the landing, and on the landing she put her hand flat against the wall and stood for the length of one held breath. Then she went to check on the linens in the third-floor cupboard. The third week the contracts appeared without ribbon. They were simply stacked on the credenza, one every second morning, and by evening they were gone. She read every one. She made her ticks in pencil and erased them before she left the room. Twice she found nothing. 3 times she found language she did not like. A delivery timing clause that could be triggered by weather. A force majeure paragraph that named a shell company in the Cayman Islands. A governing law line that referenced a jurisdiction she had never heard of. She made her ticks. She erased them. She began to notice other things. Kang started taking his morning coffee in the east dining room at 7:15 instead of 7, which meant she poured it now with the mansion already awake around them, with Loretta's voice audible from the kitchen and the scrape of Jiwoo's boots on the marble by the front door. There were witnesses to the pouring of the coffee now. There had not been before. She understood that this was a form of protection. She was not sure whose. He began to hand her his cup directly, instead of setting it back on the tray. Their fingers touched on the porcelain, a half-second, and then the cup was in her hand, and he was already looking away toward the window and the pale garden beyond. On the third such morning, she felt the tremor in his fingers before she felt the warmth of the cup. She said nothing. She carried the cup to the sideboard. She refilled it. She brought it back. She set it down on the coaster. She did not hand it to him. He did not ask. The fourth week the notes returned. Not questions this time. Observations. The Yoons in the West Parlor are cousins of Bake's mother. She read the note in the pantry with a paring knife still in her hand. She folded it. She burned it in the ash of the kitchen fire when Loretta's back was turned. That night, when she carried the after-dinner tea into the parlor and Mrs. Yoon smiled up at her with pearl earrings glinting in the lamplight, Vivian poured the tea from the correct side, set the cup on the correct saucer, and stepped back to the correct distance. She did not offer sugar. She waited until Mrs. Yoon asked, and she watched the small leather handbag on the older woman's lap the way a hawk watches a hedgerow. 2 days later, she left a note of her own in the folder of the day's contracts. The handbag has a false bottom. She adjusts it every 8 minutes. The note was gone by evening. The Yoons were gone from the West Parlor by Sunday. Loretta said only, "The master has excused them from further visits," and did not meet Vivian's eye when she said it. In the 5th week, the pattern shifted again. Kang began to be in rooms she was cleaning, not by accident. He would walk into the library while she was dusting the low shelves and take down a book he did not open. He would appear in the long gallery while she was polishing the frames of the ancestor portraits and stand at the far end looking at a painting he had walked past 10,000 times. He never spoke to her in those moments. He never looked directly at her. He was simply there, and then he was gone, and the room felt different for a quarter hour after he left. One evening, she was replacing the candles in the small chapel alcove at the end of the second-floor corridor, standing on a low step stool to reach the sconces, when she heard his tread on the runner behind her. She did not turn around. She fitted the fresh candle into the socket. She stepped down from the stool. "Miss Thorne." "Yes, sir." "You do not need to call me sir when there is nobody in the corridor." She kept her eyes on the candle. She adjusted the small brass drip catcher beneath it. She did not answer immediately. "I know I do not, sir." She heard him take one breath. She heard him let it out. "Good night, Miss Thorne." "Good night, sir." He walked away. She waited until his footsteps reached the far end of the corridor, and the sound of his study door closing followed them. Then she stepped back onto the stool and lit the candle. Her hand was perfectly steady. She noted the steadiness the way she might note the price of eggs at a market. A fact, neither good nor bad, a fact worth remembering. That same week, Jiwoo, the chief of security, began nodding to her when they passed in the servants' corridor. He had not nodded to her before. He was not a man who nodded easily. His square jaw did not move. His small dark eyes did not soften. But the head dipped, half an inch, once, each morning. She returned the nod at exactly the same depth. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them slowed. It became a small ceremony conducted at speed in a windowless hallway. And it meant, she understood, that Jiwoo had been told to watch her and had reported back that there was nothing worth watching, and that having reported this, he had decided on his own that she was to be counted among the household rather than against it. She kept her cash under her mattress. She counted it every Sunday night by the light of the single lamp. $6,340. Enough for Denise's next semester. Enough for the semester after that if the mansion held. Enough for 6 months of a small room in Harlem if the mansion did not. She wrote to Denise once a week. She did not mention Kang. She did not mention the contracts. She wrote about the weather and the flowers Loretta had brought in from the greenhouse, and a joke the second footman had told at breakfast that had made everyone laugh into their napkins. Denise wrote back with news of exams and a boy in her seminar who might or might not be worth attention. Vivian read the letters twice and folded them into the small tin box at the bottom of her wardrobe. The 6th week was the week of the coat. It began on a Tuesday. There was rain that morning, hard slanting rain that came off the East River in sheets and hammered the tall windows of the mansion. Vivian went out to the small kitchen garden at the back of the house to pull the last of the herbs before the storm broke them. She wore her thin black uniform coat, which was not enough for the weather, and her low leather shoes, which were not enough for the wet ground. She was gone 12 minutes. She came back with a basket of rosemary and thyme and sage, her hair heavy with rain, her stockings soaked through at the ankles. Loretta clucked at her in the kitchen and made her sit by the stove and drink a mug of hot broth. Vivian drank it. She changed her stockings. She dried her hair with a cloth. She went back to work. That evening, when she carried the coffee tray into the study at 9, there was a coat lying across the leather chair by the fire. A woman's coat, long, dark charcoal wool, cut narrow at the waist, with a soft velvet collar and horn buttons, and a lining the color of a winter sky at dusk. It was folded with the sleeves crossed, the way a shop attendant folds a coat for display. It had not been there that morning. Kang was at the desk. He did not look up from his ledger. "Miss Thorne." "Yes, sir." "The garden coat you wore this morning was inadequate." "Yes, sir." "There is a coat on the chair. It is yours." She set the coffee tray down on the credenza very carefully. She did not look at the coat. She did not look at him. She looked at the tray, at the small silver sugar tongs, at the porcelain of the cup she had brought him half an hour earlier and would take away in 10 minutes. "Sir." "Yes. I cannot accept the coat." He turned a page of the ledger. He did not look up. "Why not?" "Because I have not earned it, sir." "You have earned 6 weeks of correct contracts, Miss Thorne. The coat costs less than one of them." "Sir, if I accept a coat from you, the other staff will notice. And if the other staff notice, they will speak. And if they speak, the coat will mean something it does not mean." There was a long silence. He set the pen down. He closed the ledger. He looked at her for the first time since she had entered the room. His face was very still. The koi tattoo on the left side of his neck showed above the collar of his white shirt, one fine black scale catching the lamplight. "What does it not mean, Miss Thorne?" She held his gaze. She did not move. Her mouth rested in its faint, natural half-smile, which was not a smile at all in that moment, but a shape her face had learned to hold when the rest of her needed to be quiet. "It does not mean, sir, that I am your mistress. It does not mean that I am your servant in any way other than the way I was hired to be. It does not mean that 6 weeks of correct contracts have made me something I have not agreed to become. And if the coat is offered to me in a way that permits the household to imagine otherwise, then the coat is not a coat. It is a leash, and I will not wear a leash, sir. Not for a coat, not for a house, not for anything." He looked at her for a very long time. She did not look away. Finally he stood. He walked around the desk. He crossed the room to the leather chair. He picked up the coat. He folded it once more, tightly, along its original creases. He walked to the door and opened it. Jiwoo. Jiwoo appeared in the doorway. Kang handed him the coat. "Return this to the shop. Have them deliver a coat of identical warmth, unmarked, to the staff cloakroom. It is to be added to the general household stock, along with 2 others of similar quality in different sizes, for the use of any member of staff who has need of them. See to it tonight." "Yes, sir." Jiwoo took the coat. He left. Kang closed the door. He walked back to his desk. He sat down. He opened the ledger. He picked up the pen. "Miss Thorne." "Yes, sir." "The coffee is getting cold. Pour it before it does." "Yes, sir." She poured the coffee. She handed him the cup. Their fingers did not touch. He did not look up. She stepped back to the correct distance. She waited. "Thank you, Miss Thorne. That will be all." "Yes, sir." She left. In the corridor, she walked past Jiwoo, who was standing at the top of the main stairs with the coat over his arm, waiting for the car. He nodded to her. She nodded back. Neither of them slowed. In her room that night, she took out the small tin box from the bottom of the wardrobe and counted the cash. $6,340. She added the 20 she had saved from her weekly allowance. 6,360. She wrote the new figure in a small notebook and put the notebook back in the box and the box back in the wardrobe. She sat on the edge of the bed. She untied her shoes. She placed them side by side at the foot of the bed. She stood up and walked to the small oval mirror above the washstand and looked at her own face. The face looked back at her calmly. The mouth held its half-smile. The eyes were steady. The curls on the left fell forward the way they always fell. The braids on the right lay flat against the scalp the way they always lay. She said, quietly, to the mirror, "Not for a coat." She turned out the lamp. She got into bed. She slept without dreaming. On the last morning of the 6th week, she was carrying a stack of freshly ironed linens across the second-floor landing when she heard voices from the library below. She stopped at the balustrade. She did not lean over. She did not need to. The acoustics of the great hall carried the words up to her as clearly as if she had been standing in the room. Hollis. The song contract closed cleanly. The park deal closed cleanly. The Port Authority filing was corrected before submission. In 11 years of practice, Mr. Kang, I have never seen a run like this. Kang, continue. Hollis. Sir, I have to ask, who has been reading these documents before they reach my office? Silence. Hollis. Mr. Kang. Kang. Mr. Hollis. You will send me the next contract by Wednesday morning. You will file the one you have with the clerk on Friday. You will not ask that question again. Hollis. Sir. Kang. You will not ask it, Mr. Hollis, because you already know the answer, and the answer is not one I am prepared to say aloud in this house. There was a long pause, then the sound of Hollis's briefcase closing, then footsteps across the marble, then the front door. Vivian stood at the balustrade with the stack of linens against her chest. She did not move for a full count of 10. Then she walked, quietly and at her ordinary pace, down the corridor to the linen cupboard, and she put the linens away one by one on the shelves where they belonged, smoothing each fold flat with the side of her hand. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of a contract that had never been signed, of a name that had been written once on a sheet of cream stationery and never spoken aloud, of coffee cups handed and taken back, of pencil ticks made and erased, of a coat refused and reshaped into a rule for the whole household. 6 weeks in which the mansion itself had begun to breathe around them, timbers settling differently in the walls, doors closing more softly, the servants moving through the halls with the quiet, coordinated pace of people who did not know what they were part of, but knew they were part of something. She closed the cupboard door. She smoothed her apron. She went to fetch the tea tray for the afternoon service in the east parlor. That evening, Kang did not take his coffee in the study. He took it in the small back room off the library, the one with the single leather chair and the reading lamp and the window that looked out over the walled garden. Vivienne brought the tray. She poured the coffee. She set the cup on the small round table at his elbow. Miss Thorne. Yes, sir. Baek Do-yoon has requested a meeting. Here. Wednesday evening. Dinner for 6. He is bringing his lieutenants. She stood very still. She held the empty silver pot against her apron. Yes, sir. You will serve at the table. Yes, sir. He will look at you. He will try to make you flinch. He will speak to you in a way that is intended to embarrass me in front of my own house. Yes, sir. You will not flinch, Miss Thorne. No, sir. You will pour his wine. You will offer him bread. You will step back to the correct distance. You will look at the wall above his head. You will not meet his eyes. You will not smile. You will not answer any question he puts to you directly. You will refer every question to me. Yes, sir. And Miss Thorne. Yes, sir. If at any point in the evening you feel that you are in danger, you will walk out of the room. You will not ask permission. You will not finish the pour. You will set the bottle down. You will turn, and you will walk. Ji-woo will be at the door. He has been told. She looked at the wall above his head. She looked at the small brass clock on the mantel behind him, which read 9:15. She looked at nothing at all. Yes, sir. Thank you, Miss Thorne. That will be all. Yes, sir. She left the room. She closed the door behind her. In the corridor, she stood for the length of one long breath with her hand still on the doorknob, feeling the cold brass under her palm, and then she let go of the knob and walked, at her ordinary pace, back toward the kitchen to help Loretta plan the dinner for 6. Behind her, on the small round table by the leather chair, the coffee cooled untouched. Han Ji-woo arrived at Thorne Reed's on a Tuesday, just before noon. He wore the black tactical suit, the black shirt buttoned to the collar, the earpiece coiled behind his right ear. He crossed the small storefront in 3 steps and stopped at the corner of Vivian's desk. He did not sit. He did not remove the earpiece. Miss Thorne. Vivian set the pen down on the contract she was marking. She looked up. The half-smile stayed where it always was. Mr. Han. Bak sent 2 of his men here yesterday, Cho Min-sok and Ryu Kwan. I know. I served them coffee. Ji-woo's mouth did not move. His eyes moved once, from her face to the small round table by the window, where 2 cups still sat next to a printed sheet of paper. He looked at the paper for a long second, then back at her. Explain it to me, he said. Vivian folded her hands on the desk. The gold chain at her collarbone caught the sun. They came in at 3 in the afternoon. Cho sat here. Ryu stood by the door. Cho put his hand on the desk, on top of Mr. Yoon's lease, and he said the neighborhood was changing, and that some businesses would not survive the change. He said it in Korean first, then in English, so I could not pretend not to understand. She paused. She poured water from a small carafe into a clean glass and slid it toward Ji-woo. He did not touch it. I asked him to move his hand. He did not move it. I said, please. He smiled. I opened the drawer and took out a single sheet of paper. I laid it on top of his hand. I told him it was a copy of a clause I had memorized 6 months ago, a routing clause, buried in the 4th appendix of a treaty between 2 families. I told him that if any of my clients received another visit from any of his men, the clause would be on the desk of a federal shipping inspector by close of business the next day. I told him I had already prepared 3 sealed envelopes, one for the inspector, one for a reporter at the Journal, one for a Korean language paper in Flushing. All 3 had been dropped at the post office that morning, addressed to a friend, with instructions to release them if I did not call by 7. She stopped. She took a sip of her own water. Cho took his hand off the lease. He read the sheet. He read it twice. Ryu did not move from the door. Cho asked me if I understood what I was doing. I said I understood better than he did. He asked me who I worked for. I said I worked for the Yoons, and for Mrs. Park at the dry cleaner on the corner, and for the man who sells the flowers by the subway, and for 4 other people whose names he would not recognize. Then I asked him if he wanted more coffee. Ji-woo's mouth moved. It was not a smile. It was the ghost of one. He said no. He drank the first cup. He did not touch the second. He and Ryu left at 3:40. Ryu cracked his knuckles once at the door. Cho did not look back. Ji-woo stood for a long moment without speaking. Then he lifted the glass of water from the desk. He drank half of it in one pull. He set it down carefully. The clause was real. The clause was real. You have a copy. I have 3 copies. In 3 different places. None of them here. He nodded once. He looked at the printed sheet on the round table. He did not ask to see it. He turned toward the door, and then he stopped, and he turned back. Miss Thorne, may I ask you a question that is not from Mr. Kang? Yes. Why did you send them away with coffee instead of with fear? Vivian considered him, the half-smile deepened by a millimeter. Because fear is what they came here to plant. If I gave it back to them, they would take it home and it would grow. Coffee is harder to weaponize. Ji-woo held her gaze for 2 seconds. Then he inclined his head, one small, precise movement, and he walked out of the shop. The bell above the door chimed once. Vivian picked up her pen. She kept reading. Ji-woo drove back across the bridge with the window down. The wind was cold. He did not close it. When he reached the mansion, he did not go to the study. He went to the small office at the back of the security wing, and he closed the door, and he sat for 6 minutes without turning on the light. Then he stood up and he walked to the study. Kang Suk-jin was at the desk. The lamp was on. 2 ledgers were open. A tumbler of untouched whiskey sat on the coaster to his right. He had not shaved. The stubble was faint, but it was there, along the clean-shaven jaw where stubble had not been in a decade. The koi tattoo on his neck rose above the open collar of a shirt that was still crisp but no longer freshly pressed. He looked up. Report. Ji-woo did not sit. Cho and Ryu visited Thorne Reed's yesterday. Miss Thorne handled them. Handled them. She showed them a copy of the routing clause. She told them she had 3 sealed copies distributed. She told them the copies would be released if Baek's men visited her clients again. Kang did not move, and they left. They left, without doing anything. Cho drank a cup of coffee. Ryu stood by the door. They left at 3:40. Kang set the pen down. He did this slowly. He aligned it with the edge of the ledger. He aligned it a second time. Then he lifted his eyes to Ji-woo, and Ji-woo saw, for the first time in 11 years of service, a small twitch at the corner of the boss's mouth that had nothing to do with amusement. How did she get a copy of the clause? She memorized it, 6 months ago, when she served the wine. She memorized a routing clause on sight. Yes. In one reading. Yes. Kang stood up. He walked to the window. He put his hands in his trouser pockets, which was something he did not do. He looked out at the garden. The magnolia had not bloomed yet. The gravel path was raked in a pattern he had never bothered to notice. How many clients does she have? 17, as of this morning. The waiting list is at 22. Names. Small merchants in Koreatown. 2 elderly Korean-American couples, a dry cleaner, a florist, a woman who runs a stationery shop on 32nd Street. 3 families I do not recognize. Mr. and Mrs. Yoon are her most loyal. She has read every lease in that block twice. Every lease? Yes? Kang was silent for a long time. And Baekik. Baek is holding. He has not moved on the eastern lanes since Tuesday. He is watching her. He is watching her. He is watching her more than he is watching us. Kang turned from the window. He walked back to the desk. He did not sit. He looked at the whiskey and he did not touch it. He looked at the koi tattoo in the small mirror behind the sideboard, the one Vivienne had once cleaned with a soft cloth on a Thursday morning, and he looked away from his own reflection quickly. That is all, Ji-woo. Ji-woo did not move. Sir? Yes. With respect. She did in one afternoon what my men could not do in 3 weeks. Kang closed his eyes. I know. Sir? You may go. Ji-woo went. Kang stood at the desk for a long time after the door closed. He did not sit. He did not touch the whiskey. He walked to the sideboard, and he opened the cabinet, and he closed it, without taking anything out. He walked to the bookshelf, and he ran one finger along the spine of a book on Meiji-era shipping law that Vivienne had reshelved for him in February. He remembered watching her do it. He remembered the way she had straightened the row without being asked. He walked to the mirror. At 3 in the morning, he was still awake. The house was silent. The staff had gone to their rooms. Ji-woo's men had rotated on the north gate. The rain had started at midnight and stopped at 1 and started again at 2:40. The window was open by 2 inches. Kang stood in front of the tall mirror in his dressing room, in shirt sleeves, the collar undone, the koi visible along his neck in the low light. The stubble on his jaw was more than faint now. He looked at himself for a long time. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. I was afraid of her. He said it once. The room did not answer. He said it a second time, quieter. I was afraid of her. Not of what she had seen. Not of what she knew. Not of the clause or the wine or the treaty or the buried appendix. He had been afraid of her, of the calm in her mouth, of the way she had stood in his study on the night of the treaty dinner and said a good maid pays attention to the papers she isn't supposed to see. Of the way 6 weeks later she had brushed his hand once at the coffee pot and had not looked away when he did. Of the way she had folded the uniform on the bed the day he fired her, the apron on top, the bow smoothed, the collar centered. Of the way she had walked down the main staircase without a glance. Of the way the mansion had gone quiet after her. He had told himself, that afternoon in the study, that firing her was strategy. He had told himself she was a leak. He had told himself Bake would use her, and that removing her was pruning a branch before it broke the tree. He had told himself many things. None of them had been the truth. The truth was smaller and older and more shameful. The truth was that he had watched her cross the ballroom on the night of the treaty with a tray in her hands, and he had seen Bake see her, and he had seen Bake understand her before he himself had understood her, and that had made him afraid, because Bake was a man who understood people quickly, and if Bake could see her, then she was visible, and if she was visible, she was not a maid, and if she was not a maid, then he, Kang Suk-jin, the quiet one, had been the last man in that ballroom to know what was standing behind his chair. He had fired her because she had made him small in a room where he could not afford to be small, and she had walked down the staircase and taken his size with her. He looked at the mirror. I was afraid of her. He said it a third time, and this time the koi on his neck seemed to move once, and then be still. He walked to the desk in the corner of the dressing room. He took a sheet of paper. He wrote 7 lines. He read them. He tore the sheet in half. He wrote 3 lines on a new sheet. He read them. He folded the sheet, and he put it in the inside pocket of the jacket that hung on the door. He went to bed at 4. He did not sleep. In the morning he called Edward Hollis at 6:15. Hollis arrived at 7, the briefcase in one hand, the dark red bow tie already knotted, the round tortoiseshell glasses fogged from the cold. Kang met him in the study. Loretta brought coffee and left without speaking. Ji-woo stood by the door. Edward. Mr. Kang, I need you to draft a document, not for Balak, for me. Understood. I need it before noon. What kind of document? Kang looked at the koi in the small mirror behind the sideboard. He looked at Ji-woo. He looked at Hollis. An admission. Hollis did not blink. He set the briefcase on the small table. He took out a legal pad. He uncapped his pen. Go ahead, Mr. Kang. Kang spoke for 11 minutes. Hollis wrote. When Kang finished, Hollis read the notes back once, in his flat lawyer voice, and Kang nodded once at each item. Then Hollis closed the pad and put it in the briefcase and stood. You understand what you are asking me to prepare. I understand. Your father would not have signed this. My father is not the man walking into that shop at noon. Hollis inclined his head. He left. At 11:30, Kang called his 3 division heads into the study. They came in, one by one. Chun, from the hotels. Lim, from private security. Oh, from the import operation. They sat at the long walnut table. Ji-woo stood at the back wall. Loretta closed the door and did not enter. Kang did not sit at the head of the table. He stood at the side, where the client chair usually sat. He put his hands flat on the wood. I made 3 errors in the past 9 weeks. Chun's face did not move. Lim's face did not move. Oh, looked at Chun. Error 1. I let Baekek's men leave the treaty dinner with a routing clause I had not read. Error 2. I did not read the clause because I had someone in this house who had read it for me, and I did not credit her for it. Error 3. I removed that person from this house because her intelligence made me look smaller than her, in front of Beck, at my own table. He paused. He did not look away from Chun's face. The person is Vivian Thorne. She was employed in this house as a live-in domestic housekeeper for 5 months. She corrected 17 contracts on my desk during that period, without my knowledge. She stopped the Bordeaux at the treaty signing by spilling it on the signature block, and she did so because she had recognized a buried routing clause in the 4th appendix. She read that clause once, on site, while pouring wine. She has since opened a small contract reading business in Koreatown. Yesterday, she stopped Cho and Ryu from intimidating her clients using a copy of the same clause and 3 sealed envelopes she distributed by mail. Lim's mouth opened. It closed. I am telling you this because I fired her on Tuesday of the 7th week. I did not fire her for cause. I fired her because I was afraid of her. I told her she was fired. She said, as you wish, sir. She folded the uniform on the bed, and she walked down the main staircase, and she left this house without a glance. Since that day, this house has lost 4 contracts, the Beck pressure on the eastern lanes has doubled, and the men in this room have watched me make tactical errors that would have shamed my father. He stopped. He looked at each of them. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am telling you what I did. so that when I do what I am about to do at noon, you will know why. O spoke first. His voice was flat. What are you about to do at noon? I am going to Thorn Reed's. I am going to kneel. The room did not move. Chun set his hands on the table. He interlaced his fingers. Mr. Kang. Yes. That is not done. I know. No boss of this family has knelt in the street in 4 generations. I know. You understand what the other families will hear. They will hear what happened. They will hear you knelt. They will hear I knelt for a reason. Lim looked at Jiwoo. Jiwoo did not move. O spoke again. And after, if she stands me up, I come home. If she does not, I stay on my knees until she does. Chun exhaled once through his nose. It was the closest thing to protest he would allow himself. Then he nodded. Once. Small. Precise. We will go with you. You will stand behind me, 10 paces, no weapons visible, no car engines running. You will not enter the shop. Understood. At 11:50, Hollis returned with the document. He handed it to Kang in a brown envelope. Kang did not open it. He put the envelope inside the breast pocket of his jacket, folded once, next to the 3 lines he had written at 4 in the morning. At 11:56, the car left the mansion. At 12:04, the car stopped 1 block from Thorn Reed's. Kang stepped out first. He wore the midnight black 3-piece suit, the white shirt, the matte silk dark tie fully knotted, the mirror-polished Oxfords. The koi was above the collar. The signet ring was on the right middle finger. Jiwoo stepped out behind him. Chun, Lim, and O from the second car. 10 paces back, as instructed. No visible weapons. The 3 division heads walked in a line, hands empty, expressions unreadable. The sidewalk was not empty. 2 old women stopped mid-conversation. Mr. Yoon, coming out of the bakery next door with a paper bag, stopped and stared. A boy on a bicycle put 1 foot down and did not lift it again. 2 of Baek's men, watching the street from a black SUV across the way, sat forward in their seats and did not move. Kang walked to the door of Thorn Reed's. He opened it. The bell chimed. Vivian was at the desk. She was reading a lease. Her pen was uncapped. The gold chain at her collarbone caught the light. The braids on the right side were pulled back and clean. The curls on the left fell forward over her shoulder. She looked up. She saw Kang. She saw Jiwoo behind him. She saw the 3 men in a line on the sidewalk through the glass. She saw the sidewalk stopping to watch. Her pen did not move. Kang crossed the small shop in 4 steps. He stopped 3 feet from the desk. He did not speak. He knelt. Both knees, on the wooden floor, slowly. The trouser cloth pulled tight at the thigh. The Oxfords aligned behind him. His hands rested on his knees, palms down. His back was straight. His eyes did not leave hers. The shop was silent. On the sidewalk, Jiwoo did not move. Chun did not move. Lim did not move. O closed his eyes for 1 second and opened them. Vivian set the pen down. She capped it. She placed it beside the lease. She folded her hands. She waited. Kang spoke. Miss Thorne. Mr. Kang. I am not here as your employer. You are not my employer. I am not here with a job. I would not accept one. I am here to offer you my name. The shop did not answer. He reached into the breast pocket of the jacket. He took out the folded sheet with 3 lines on it. He unfolded it once. He read it aloud in a voice that did not shake and did not rise. I, Kang Suk-jin, ask Vivian Thorne to marry me. I offer no protection because she does not need it. I offer no fortune because she does not want it. I offer only the man who walked into this shop and the man who will walk out of it, whether she accepts or refuses. He refolded the sheet. He held it out on his open palm. Vivian did not take it. She looked at him for a long time, longer than was comfortable. Long enough that Chun on the sidewalk shifted his weight once and stilled again. Then she spoke. Stand up, Mr. Kang. He did not move. Stand up. I will stand when you accept. You will stand because I told you to. He hesitated. He rose. Slowly. His knees did not crack. The trouser cloth fell straight. He remained 3 feet from the desk. The folded sheet was still in his hand. I will not accept, Vivian said. Kang's face did not move. Behind him, Jiwoo's shoulders lowered by a fraction that only Jiwoo could feel. I will not accept because you knelt, she continued. If I accept a man who knelt, I marry a man who is on his knees. I do not want a husband on his knees. I want a husband standing. So stand. I am standing. Now say it. Say what? Say the thing you said at 3 in the morning in front of a mirror. In this shop, in front of your men. In front of Mr. Yoon at the door. In front of the 2 of Baek's men in the black car across the street, who are recording this on their phones. Kang did not turn to look at the black car. He did not need to. He looked at Vivian. I fired you because I was afraid of you. Louder. I fired you because I was afraid of you. Why? Because you were bigger than me at my own table. Louder. Because you were bigger than me at my own table. The word bigger cracked in the small shop. Mr. Yoon at the door did not move. The boy on the bicycle did not move. Jiwoo's jaw tightened once and released. Vivian nodded. Good. She stood. She walked around the desk. She stopped 1 foot from him. She was shorter than him by a hand's width. She did not tilt her head back to meet his eyes. She let him lower his. Tomorrow you come back, she said. No suit, no men, no crown, just you. You knock on that door at 10. I will decide then whether I let you in for coffee. I will not decide about your name for a long time. If you cannot wait, do not come. If you come and cannot wait, do not come again. I will come. At 10. At 10. Without them. Without them. And Mr. Kang. Yes. The clause stays with me. The 3 envelopes stay with me. The 17 contracts on the desk stay with me. If Baek moves on any of my clients, the envelopes go out. If you move on any of them, the envelopes go out. My shop is not part of your empire. It will not be part of your marriage. Do you understand? I understand. Then go. He inclined his head. Once, precise, small, the same movement Jiwoo had used on her the day before at that same desk. He turned. He walked to the door. He opened it. The bell chimed. He stepped out into the street. On the sidewalk, Chun exhaled through his nose. Lim looked at Oh. Oh looked at Jiwoo. Jiwoo looked at Kang. Kang did not speak. He walked to the car. He got in. Jiwoo closed the door behind him. The 3 division heads got into the second car. Mr. Yoon crossed himself with the paper bag still in his hand and went back into the bakery to tell his wife. The boy on the bicycle put both feet on the pedals and rode away very slowly. The 2 of Baek's men in the black car lowered their phones. One of them was already dialing. Baek Do-yoon would hear within the hour. Baek Do-yoon would understand within 2. Baek Do-yoon would not move on the eastern lanes again. Inside the shop, Vivian stood alone by the desk. The folded sheet with 3 lines on it was on the floor where Kang had left it. She bent and picked it up. She read it once, she refolded it. She placed it inside the top drawer, on top of the copy of the routing clause, beneath the small ledger where she recorded her clients' names in her own hand. She closed the drawer. She walked to the window. She turned the small sign from open to closed for the lunch hour. The sunlight came through the glass and lay across the wooden floor in a clean, bright rectangle. It touched the spot where Kang had knelt. She looked at the rectangle for a moment. Then she walked back to the desk. She uncapped the pen. She pulled Mr. Yoon's lease toward her. She found the line where she had stopped an hour before. She kept reading. Outside, the street began to move again. Inside, the small round table by the leather chair held 2 clean cups and a fresh carafe of water, waiting for whoever came next. The coffee, this time, would be poured hot. The bell above the door rang again before the water in the carafe had settled. A young woman in a delivery service polo stepped inside, carrying a folder pressed to her chest like something that might bite. Her name tag read Rosa. She had circles under her eyes and the kind of tight jaw that comes from 3 nights of not sleeping. Vivian rose from the leather chair, smoothed the front of her tailored charcoal trousers, and gestured to the seat opposite the small round table. Rosa sat on the edge of the cushion. She did not lean back. She slid the folder across the table and kept her hand flat on top of it for a second longer than she meant to, as if the paper was still hers, and she was not sure she wanted to let go. They said if I did not sign by Friday, they would take the van, Rosa said. Her voice was steady, but her fingers were not. The van is how I feed my kids. Vivian poured the water. She poured Rosa's cup first. She set it down within easy reach, and then she poured her own. She did not touch the folder yet. She let Rosa look at the water, and at the small, clean cup, and at the wall behind the desk where a single framed page hung, a photocopy of a contract with one clause circled in red pen and the word "attention" written in Vivian's own hand beneath it. "May I read it?" Vivian said. It was not a question the way most people asked questions. Rosa nodded. She lifted her hand off the folder and put both hands around the water cup like it was warming her. Vivian opened the folder. 22 pages. Standard delivery driver independent contractor agreement on the surface, printed in a font a little too small, spaced a little too tight. She turned the pages with the flat of her thumb, the way Loretta had once turned the pages of the mansion's linen inventory, unhurried, complete. On page 11, her thumb stopped. She read the paragraph twice. She read it a third time to make sure the verb was doing what she thought the verb was doing. Then she reached for the red pen on the table and drew a small, clean circle in the margin. "Rosa," she said, "look here." Rosa leaned forward. Vivian turned the folder around so the page faced the driver instead of herself. "This clause says the van is collateral," Vivian said. "That part you already knew. But this word here, this one, says that if you miss 2 consecutive weekly quotas for any reason, including illness, including a family emergency, including the company changing your route without notice, the title of the van transfers automatically. Not after a hearing, not after a warning, automatically. And this line here says you waive the right to contest that transfer in any court in the state of New York." Rosa's mouth opened a little. She closed it. She opened it again. "They said it was standard," she said. "It is standard," Vivian said. "For them, it is not standard for you." She set the pen down. She folded her hands on top of the open folder. She let Rosa breathe for 4 seconds. Then she spoke again, quiet, level. "You have 2 options. You can sign it and hope you never get sick, or you can hand me this folder and let me write them a letter tonight explaining that this clause is unconscionable under New York contract law and that we will be requesting a rewrite before Friday. If they refuse the rewrite, we file a small claims notice on Monday, and by Tuesday morning your dispatcher will be on the phone asking to talk to me instead of to you." Rosa stared at her. "You can do that." "I can do that," Vivian said. "I have done it 4 times this month." Rosa's eyes filled but did not spill. She reached across the table and covered Vivian's folded hands with her own. Her palm was rough from the steering wheel and warm from the cup. "How much?" Rosa said. "Sliding scale," Vivian said. 30 for the letter, nothing more until they respond. If they rewrite, we call it done. If we file, we talk about the next number when it becomes a real number." Rosa nodded. She wiped her cheek with the back of her wrist. She stood up, she sat down again. She stood up a second time, and this time she stayed standing. "Thank you," she said. It came out too quiet, and then again, louder. "Thank you." Vivienne rose with her. She walked her to the door. She held it open. On the sidewalk, Rosa turned back once, as if to make sure the storefront was real, and then she got into the delivery van parked at the curb and she drove away. Vivian watched the van take the corner. Then she closed the door and turned the small brass sign in the window from open to be right back, and she sat down at her desk and began to write the letter. She wrote it by hand first, on a yellow legal pad, because handwriting slowed her down enough to catch the traps she might set for herself. She wrote the salutation. She wrote the identifying paragraph. She wrote the clause in question, quoted in full, with a single underline beneath the word that mattered. She wrote the citation, a state appellate decision from 2017 that Edward Hollis had once mentioned in passing at the Kang Mansion and that she had looked up that same night in the library on East 53rd, and she footnoted it neatly. Citation. She closed with a paragraph that was courteous, brief, and left no room for interpretation. Then she typed it. Then she printed it. Then she signed it. Then she slid it into an envelope and set the envelope on the corner of the desk, addressed and stamped, ready for the morning mail. She was pouring herself a second cup of water when the bell above the door rang again. The man who walked in did not look like Rosa. He was in a charcoal wool coat with the collar turned up and a scarf that had cost more than Rosa's van. He was Korean, mid-50s, silver at the temples, silver in the shape of his cufflinks. He took the coat off slowly, folded it once over his arm, and looked around the small storefront the way a man looks at a room he intends to buy. "Miss Thorne," he said. "Yes. My name is Pak Jun-ho. I am the owner of 3 dry cleaning stores in Koreatown, 2 laundromats in Flushing, and a small parking garage on West 32nd. I have been told, by 4 different people in 3 days, that if I want a contract read honestly, I come here." Vivian inclined her head, the smallest fraction of a nod. She gestured to the leather chair. Mr. Pak did not sit right away. He walked once around the small room. He looked at the framed page on the wall. He looked at the shelf of contract law reference books she had bought used from a bookstore on 4th Avenue, most of them still with the previous owner's highlighter marks on the pages. He looked at the small brass sign in the window, still turned to "Be right back." Then he sat down in the leather chair, and he opened a leather portfolio, and he set a stack of paper on the table between them. "Commercial lease," he said. 15 years, new building on 32nd Street. My son negotiated it. My son is a good boy, but he is 26 years old and he trusts people who wear watches. Read it. Tell me what he agreed to." Vivian took the stack. She weighed it in her hands. 38 pages. She turned to the first page and she began to read. Mr. Pak did not fidget. He sat with his hands folded on his knee and he watched her read. Somewhere in the middle of page 7, she made a small sound in the back of her throat. Not a word, barely a breath, and Mr. Pak's eyes sharpened. On page 12, she reached for the red pen without looking up. On page 19, she drew a small, clean circle. On page 24, she drew another. On page 31, she closed the contract, folded her hands on top of it, and looked at him. "Your son," she said, "agreed to a rent escalator tied to a commercial index that does not exist anymore. The index was retired in 2023. That means the clause defaults to the landlord's discretion, which means your rent can be doubled in year 3 and there is no cap. Also, on page 24, he agreed to personally guarantee the lease, which means if the business fails, they can come after your house in Bayside. Also, on page 31, there is a right of first refusal clause that lets the landlord buy the business at book value if you ever try to sell it, which means you cannot leave, you can only die out of this lease." Mr. Pak stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. It was a short, dry laugh, one syllable, almost a cough, and then he laughed again, longer, and shook his head. "My son," he said, "my good boy. I will not tell him yet. First I will fix it, then I will tell him." "I can write the counter-proposal tonight," Vivian said. "If you can get me the landlord's contact information, I will have the red-lined version to you by tomorrow evening. If the landlord refuses, we walk. There are 3 other buildings on that block with vacant retail space. I checked this morning, after another client asked about the same address." Mr. Pak studied her. He studied her the way he had studied the room when he walked in, as if trying to figure out what she was really made of, and whether he had been sent the right person, or a lucky accident. "Miss Thorne," he said, "may I ask an impertinent question?" "You may. Where did you learn to read a lease like that?" Vivian set the red pen down. She did not answer for a beat. She looked at the framed page on the wall, the one with the single circled clause, and then she looked back at Mr. Pak. "In a house," she said. "I learned in a house where the papers on the desk mattered more than the people who signed them. I paid attention. Then I paid attention for 5 years." Mr. Pak nodded slowly, as if this was exactly the answer he had hoped for, and not quite the one he expected. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat, and he pulled out a slim envelope and he set it on the table between them. "Retainer," he said, "for a month. If you finish the lease before the month is out, keep the balance. If a month is not enough, you tell me the number and I will match it. I do not haggle with people who circle clauses." Vivian looked at the envelope. She did not open it. She slid it a 1/4 inch back toward him with the tip of one finger. "Mr. Pak," she said, "Thorne reads charges by the letter and by the appearance, not by the retainer. If I take a retainer from you, I owe you something even when you do not need me. I would rather owe you nothing until you ask for something. It keeps my reading honest." Mr. Pak looked at her. He looked at the envelope. He slid it back across the table toward her. "Then charge me for the letter now and the appearance later," he said, "and keep the rest as a courtesy from a man who has been robbed politely for 30 years and is grateful to finally meet someone who does not intend to rob him." Vivian almost smiled. The corners of her mouth moved and the movement was gone before it was quite a smile, but Mr. Pock saw it, and he inclined his head as if he had been paid. "Tomorrow evening," she said. "The red-lined lease, delivered by hand or emailed, whichever you prefer." "By hand," Mr. Pock said. "I want to see the office again when it is busy." He stood. He put his coat back on with the same unhurried folding motion he had used to take it off. He walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the brass handle, and he turned back. "Miss Thorne." "Yes." "I have friends. My friends have friends. In this neighborhood, that is a river, not a fact. Do you want the river?" Vivian considered the question the way she had considered the clause on page 7, as if there was a verb inside it doing work she needed to understand before she answered. "I want the river," she said, "but only the honest tributaries. Send me the merchants. Do not send me the men who want me to make bad paper look good. I do not have the stomach for that work, and I will not develop it." Mr. Pock smiled. It was a small, sharp, satisfied smile, the smile of a man who has just confirmed something he had already decided. "The honest tributaries," he repeated. "I like that. I will send them." He opened the door. The bell rang. He left. Vivian sat back down at the desk. She turned the brass sign in the window back to open. She looked at the 2 envelopes stacked at the corner of the desk. Rose's letter, addressed and stamped, and a fresh sheet of yellow legal pad already waiting for Mr. Pock's red lines. She looked at the wall clock. It was 3:10 in the afternoon. The bell rang again. By the time she locked the storefront at 9 that night, she had read 4 more contracts, taken 2 more retainers she had gently deflected into per-letter arrangements, added 6 names to the leather-bound appointment book she kept beside the leather chair, and drunk her body weight in water because she had not eaten since morning and did not notice until Loretta called at 7 and asked if she had eaten and made her promise to eat something on the walk home. She walked home. She lived 3.5 blocks from the storefront, in a 4th-floor walk-up above a Korean bakery whose owner had, on the second day of Thorne Reed's existence, come downstairs with a paper bag of red bean pastries and said in careful English, "You read the papers. We feed you." She ate one of those pastries on the stairs on her way up. She ate a second one in the kitchen standing at the counter, and then she made herself sit down at the small table by the window and eat a real meal, rice and a piece of grilled fish and a small dish of kimchi, before she opened her laptop and began the red-lined lease for Mr. Pock. She worked until midnight. She slept from midnight to 5. She was back at the storefront by 7, unlocking, turning on the small brass lamp on the desk, setting out fresh water in a fresh carafe. She turned the sign to open at 8. The first client was waiting on the sidewalk. So was the second. Uptown, across the park, the mansion did not know it was decaying yet, but the decay had begun. The linen closet on the 3rd floor had been reorganized twice in 3 weeks by a new girl who did not know that the winter linens went on the east shelf, because the east shelf was the driest, and the summer linens went on the west shelf, because the west wall shared a chimney flue that ran warm. The girl put everything alphabetically. She was proud of this system. On the 4th night after she implemented it, a stack of dinner napkins pulled from the west shelf came to the table faintly damp, and Loretta, who had inherited the linen closet from Vivian without inheriting the map that had lived in Vivian's head, apologized to Kang at the sideboard and offered to replace the napkins. Kang did not answer. He looked at the damp napkin for a long moment. He set it aside. He asked for a dry one. He ate the rest of the meal without speaking. The wine cellar inventory had drifted. 2 bottles of the 2011 Bordeaux that Kang preferred for winter dinners had been quietly reshelved by the same new girl into the summer white section because she thought the color of the label matched better there, and when the sommelier who came in on Thursdays went looking for them, he found nothing, and he substituted a 2013 that was almost right and not quite. Kang tasted the 2013. He set the glass down after 1 sip. He did not send it back. He did not comment. He simply did not drink wine that night. Han Ji-woo noticed. Han Ji-woo noticed everything. Han Ji-woo did not say anything. Han Ji-woo watched his employer sit through a dinner without wine and eat with a napkin that was not quite the right napkin, and speak 2 fewer words than usual to a lieutenant who had come in from Queens with a report about the docks. And Han Ji-woo made a small mental note that the mansion was running on a different clock now, a clock that was almost right and not quite. The clock got worse in the 2nd week. A shipment of luxury handbags that Kang's import division moved through a bonded warehouse in Newark was delayed by a customs form that had been filled out with a wrong tariff code. It was a small error. It cost 2 days and a modest penalty. 2 months earlier, the form would have crossed a desk on the second floor of the mansion, where Vivienne, delivering laundered shirts to a wardrobe cabinet, would have paused, read the code upside down while pretending to smooth a sleeve, and mentioned to Loretta on the stairs that the code looked like the one for costume jewelry and not for leather goods. Loretta would have mentioned it to Edward Hollis at afternoon tea. Edward Hollis would have mentioned it to the compliance clerk. The form would have been fixed before it was filed. This time, nothing paused on the second floor. The form was filed. The shipment was delayed. Kang paid the penalty and said nothing about it in the study, but he sat at his desk for a long time that night, with his hands folded and the koi tattoo at his throat, moving faintly with the swallow of a man trying not to think about a name. The name pressed anyway. He would not let it into the front of his mouth. He let it live behind his teeth. He drank tea. He signed papers. He did not send anyone to Koreatown. He forbade himself from sending anyone to Koreatown. He set the forbidding as a rule the way he set rules for his lieutenants, and he obeyed his own rule the way he expected them to obey his, and the rule cost him something every day and he paid it every day. Baek Do-yoon did not obey any rule. Baek Do-yoon sent his men. They came in twos. First to a stationery shop on West 32nd, where a small merchant named Mr. Ha had begun using thorn reeds to review his supplier contracts. Cho Min-sok, the bleached blonde enforcer with the loyalty tattoo on his wrist, walked in a Tuesday afternoon with Ryu Kwan behind him. They bought a pack of envelopes. They asked Mr. Ha in Korean whether he had heard of a new office nearby that read contracts for people. They said the word office with a small, quiet twist that made it sound like the word problem. Mr. Ha said he had not heard of it. Cho Min-sok smiled, paid in cash, said that if Mr. Ha ever did hear of it, he should perhaps forget he heard of it, because sometimes new offices in old neighborhoods burned down in the winter, and it was a shame when small businessmen had to explain to their families why the shop next door was on fire. Then he took the envelopes and left. Ryu Kwan cracked his knuckles at the door on his way out. Mr. Ha closed the shop early. He walked 6 blocks. He walked into thorn reeds at 4 in the afternoon, with a face the color of dry rice paper. He sat in the leather chair across from Vivienne. He drank 3 cups of water before he could speak. Then he told her, in a Korean-inflected English that broke twice, about the 2 men and the envelopes and the small quiet twist. Vivienne listened. She did not interrupt. When he was finished, she poured him a 4th cup of water and she sat with her hands folded on top of the yellow legal pad and she was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Ha," she said, "may I ask you 3 questions?" He nodded. "First, did they threaten you personally, or did they threaten the office?" "The office," Mr. Ha said, "but also me, because I said I did not know it." "Second, do you know who they work for?" Mr. Ha's mouth tightened. "Buck." "Third, do you want me to stop reading your contracts so they leave you alone?" Mr. Ha looked at her. He looked at the small brass lamp on the desk. He looked at the framed page on the wall. He looked at the leather appointment book beside the leather chair. Then he looked back at her, and his mouth was no longer tight. "No," he said. "I want you to keep reading them. My son says I am too old to be brave. My son does not read Korean politics the way I read them. Baek is trying to close a door. When Baek tries to close a door, small men like me lose the room behind the door. I do not want to lose the room. Read my contracts." Vivienne inclined her head. She reached across the table, and she covered his hand with hers, briefly, the way Rosa had covered hers on the first day. Then she withdrew her hand, and she picked up the pen. "Then I will read them," she said, "and I will do one other thing, if you will permit me." "Anything." "I will write down what happened this afternoon. Every word, every gesture, the color of Cho Min-sok's hair, the tattoo on his wrist, what he said in Korean, and what he said in English. I will keep this written down in a safe place. If those men come back, or if they come to any other merchant on this street, we will have a record. Records are quiet. Records last. Records outlive men in leather jackets." Mr. Ha nodded slowly. "You are a careful woman, Miss Thorne." "I was trained by careful people," Vivienne said. "In a house." She wrote it down that night. She wrote it down in a leather-bound notebook she had bought that same evening from the stationery shop next door, from Mr. Ha, At a discount he insisted on giving her, and she insisted on refusing. She wrote the date, she wrote the time, she wrote the two names, she wrote every word she could remember of Mr. Ha's account. She wrote the phrase, "small quiet twist," in her own handwriting and underlined it once. Then she closed the notebook. She put it in the bottom drawer of the desk. She locked the drawer with a small brass key she wore on a thin gold chain around her neck, tucked inside the collar of her silk blouse, next to the pocket watch she had carried out of the Kang mansion, in the pocket of a folded apron 5 weeks before. The key and the watch touched softly against her collarbone when she moved. Outside, on West 32nd Street, a car with darkened windows drove slowly past the storefront and did not stop. Inside, Vivian turned the brass sign in the window from "open" to "be right back," and she sat down in the leather chair by the small round table, and she picked up the fresh yellow legal pad, and she began to write the next letter. The coffee, this time, would be poured cold, from a small silver pitcher, into 2 clean cups, and set out ready for whoever came next. The next letter was to a Korean widow named Mrs. Park, who ran a small dry cleaning shop 3 blocks east, and who had signed a lease 6 months earlier that hid a rent escalator clause behind 3 subclauses and a footnote in 10-point type. Vivian wrote in blue ink, in a hand neither hurried nor slow. She named the clause. She named the page. She named the paragraph. She named the word. She circled nothing, because circles were for people who did not trust their own reading. She signed her name, Vivian Thorne, and slid the letter into a plain white envelope and pressed the flap closed with the flat of her palm. Outside, the light in Koreatown was going from flat noon glare to a slower amber that fell across the storefronts at an angle and made the gold characters on the awnings look wet. A boy on a delivery bike rode past ringing a small brass bell. The neighborhood had, over the last 2 weeks, developed a habit of not looking at Thorne Reeds that was in fact the most attentive kind of looking there is. She rose from the leather chair and turned the brass sign back from "be right back" to "open," and she sat down and waited. Because a business built on trust is a business built on being reliably in the chair when someone finally works up the courage to walk through the door. They came at 4:12. 2 of them, Cho Min-sok first, because Cho Min-sok was always first, bleached blonde hair catching the amber light and turning briefly the color of dirty gold, black leather jacket zipped halfway, hands shoved in the pockets in the way men shove their hands when they want you to wonder what is in the pockets. Behind him, half a step back, Ryu Kwan, wiry, silent, the vertical scar splitting his left eyebrow twitching once as he scanned the room. They did not push the door. They opened it. They wiped their boots on the small mat. Ryu Kwan closed the door behind them with the soft click of a man who had been taught, somewhere, that doors are closed and not slammed. Vivian did not rise. She was seated at the small round table, the yellow pad in front of her, the blue pen resting across the top at a perfect diagonal. Her hair fell forward on the left in loose defined curls covering part of her forehead and cascading over her left shoulder and chest. On the right, the fine, tight braids ran back from her temple close to the scalp, strong and asymmetric. She wore high-waist charcoal trousers and a silk blouse in deep burgundy tucked in at the waist, and the thin gold chain at her throat caught the amber light and threw it back in a single narrow line. Her mouth rested in its faint, natural half-smile. "Gentlemen," she said. Cho Min-sok walked to the table and put both palms flat on the wood and leaned forward, his silver throat chain swinging out a 1/4 inch and back. Ryu Kwan stayed by the door, cracked his knuckles once, and put his back against the frame. "Boss Beck," said Cho Min-sok. "He say you have paper. Paper belong to him. He want back." Vivian looked at his left hand, at the Hanja tattoo for loyalty, just visible under the leather cuff, at the 2 coffee rings the previous client had left on the table's edge. She looked at his face last. "Mr. Cho," she said, "I don't have any paper that belongs to Mr. Beck." "You have." "I have," she said. "A memory. Memory is not paper. A memory belongs to the person who remembers." Cho's fingers spread a 1/2 inch wider on the wood. The smile came onto his face the way certain smiles come onto certain men's faces, thin and rehearsed and empty. "Miss Thorne," he said, "you get, how you say, you get accident, slip on ice, fall down stair. Then who helps small people read paper?" Vivian did not move. She reached, without hurry, for the porcelain coffee cup on the round table, half full, cold now. She wrapped her fingers around the cup so that the cup sat in her palm, the way a small stone sits in a palm. She did not raise it. She held it, and looked at Cho over the rim. Mr. Cho, I am going to say 3 things. Please listen carefully, because I will not repeat them. He waited. First, you are not going to touch any of my clients. If anyone I have ever read for slips on ice, or falls down a stair, or discovers his shop set on fire at 3 in the morning, I will know it was you. Not think, no, and I will act accordingly. Second, the clause I saw at Mr. Kang's dinner table 5 weeks ago is not on paper in this office. It is not in a safety deposit box. It is in my head, and the head of an attorney whose name I will not tell you, and the head of a journalist at the New York Financial Ledger, whose name I will not tell you either. If anything happens to me, anything at all, Mr. Cho, that clause appears on the front page of the business section on Monday, under a headline that says, Korean Syndicate Attempted Fraud During Peace Treaty. Your boss loses every partner he has in 3 time zones. And when a man like Mr. Beck loses face, do you know who he blames? Not the woman who published it. The men who let her live long enough to publish it. She lifted the cup then, sipped once, slowly, and set it down with a small, clean click. Third, you came here today, and Mr. Beck does not know. Cho Min-sok's face did a thing, then his face was not built to do. It stiffened. Mr. Beck sent you against the advice of his consigliere. He sent 2 men in daylight to threaten a black woman running a legitimate business 3 weeks after a peace treaty. If this errand had been approved, you would have come at 3 in the morning, through the alley, without your leather jacket, and Mr. Ryu would not have knocked his knuckles at my doorframe, because a man who is going to do work does not warn a room he is in it. You were sent to frighten me. Because Mr. Baek does not want blood in Koreatown, he wants me quiet, and his first-tier men would have refused. Am I close? Cho Min-sok did not answer. I thought so. Now, you will walk back to Mr. Beck's office in the Ambrose building on West 32nd. You will tell him Miss Thorne was polite. You will tell him Miss Thorne offered you coffee. And you will tell him, this part is important, Mr. Cho, please write it down in your head. You will tell him the clause stays in her head, as long as her clients stay untouched, and that Mr. Beck is welcome to make an appointment at Thorne Reed's, any Tuesday between 2 and 4, if he would like to discuss terms in person. The coffee here is very good. She smiled then, for the first time. The smile did not reach her eyes. Gentlemen. Cho lifted his palms off the wood. The prints of his hands stayed a moment on the varnish, twin ovals of damp, and evaporated. He turned. Ryu opened the door. They left. The small brass bell rang once, cleanly. The door clicked shut. The amber light in Koreatown continued to slant across the storefronts at the same angle it had been slanting before they arrived. Vivian sat still for perhaps 20 seconds. Then she turned the pad to a fresh page and wrote in blue ink a single line. Beck, Do-yoon. Courtesy visit, 4:12 p.m. Cho Min-sok plus Ryu Kwan. No violence attempted. Verbal threat Ri-do-mard. Clients. My response memorialized. And she underlined it once, and rose and walked to the small kitchenette at the back, and put the kettle on, because her 5 o'clock client would need coffee. Across the city, in a black car parked on a side street off the West Side Highway, Han Ji-woo listened for a moment to something no one else could hear. Then he raised the window and he started the engine and drove north to the Kang mansion. He did not stop at the guardhouse. He entered through the service door, climbed the back stairs, walked the long corridor, and knocked twice on the study door. Enter. Kang Sok-jin was at his desk, not working. Elbows on the arms of the chair, fingertips pressed together in a soft steeple in front of his mouth. Jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled once. Above the collar, the fine-lined black koi curled up the left side of his neck. His hair combed back and slightly to the side in its single clean part. In his right hand, held between 2 fingers, was the heavy black metal signet ring, which he had removed and was turning end over end. He did not look up. Speak. Boss, Beck's men went to see Miss Thorne this afternoon. The turning of the ring stopped. Which men? Cho Min-sok, Ryu Kwan. 4:12 p.m. Injuries? None. What happened? Han Ji-woo did not consult a notebook. He had committed the report to memory on the drive north, in the way a chief of security commits a report to memory when the report concerns a woman whose name has not been spoken aloud in the Kang mansion for 3 weeks. They walked in the front door. Cho leaned on her table with both palms, threatened her clients, implied accidents. She was seated. She held a coffee cup. She said 3 things to him. First, if her clients have accidents, she will know it was Bakik and act. Second, the clause she saw at your treaty dinner is memorized by her and by a journalist at the Financial Ledger and by an unnamed attorney, and if anything happens to her, the clause runs Monday on the front page. Third, that Beck sent second-tier men because his first tier would have refused a daylight errand, and that Beck is welcome to make an appointment at Thorne Reed's any Tuesday between 2 and 4 to discuss terms in person, and that the coffee is very good. Han Ji-woo paused. She dismissed them. They left through the front door. She wrote the encounter down in blue ink and put the kettle on for her next client. Kang Sok-jin sat very still. The ring resumed its slow end-over-end turn. How do we know all of this? Cho has an ex-wife. Her brother works in our kitchen. Cho went home at 4:40 and spoke to the ex-wife. The brother came to me at 5:15. There was no need to pay him. He was afraid, boss. Afraid that if Bakek's men killed a black woman on our old block, the neighborhood would think it was us. Kang closed his eyes for 10 seconds. When he opened them, nothing in his face had moved. But he set the ring down on the desk on top of a folded white square of paper with a small, precise click. Ji-woo, say the part again where she held the cup. She was seated. She did not rise. She reached for the porcelain cup. Half full, cold. She wrapped her fingers around it. She did not raise it. She held it in her palm, the way a small stone sits in a palm. She looked at Cho over the rim. She spoke her 3 points. Only after the 3rd point did she sip once and set it down. Then she told them to leave. Du-woo, a woman with a cold coffee cup, faced 2 of Baek Do-yoon's enforcers, alone in her own shop, and sent them home to their boss with a message and a threat and a suggestion for coffee on Tuesday afternoons. Yes, boss. And no one in my organization did this for her. No, boss. And no one in my organization did this for her. No, boss. She did this. Kang Sok-jin nodded once. Ji-woo, please leave the room. Han Ji-woo bowed and turned and closed the door with the soft click of a man who had been taught, somewhere, that doors are closed and not slammed. Kang Sok-jin sat alone. The lamplight fell across the desk, across the untouched glass of water, across the signet ring on the folded white square of paper. Outside the study window, the afternoon had gone into the deeper blue of early evening. Somewhere in the mansion, a clock chimed 6, then 8, then 11, then midnight, then 2. At 3 in the morning, standing in front of the tall mirror mounted on the study's east wall, Kang Sok-jin, boss of the Kang Syndicate of Manhattan, Koreatown, spoke aloud for the first time to the man in the glass. I was afraid of her. The words came out very quietly. Not because she knew the clause, not because she saw the paper, not because she cost me face in front of Bekik. I was afraid of her because she was bigger than me in my own house, bigger than me at my own table, bigger than me with a wine bottle in her hand and a Bordeaux stain on the signature block, bigger than me for 6 weeks of silent contract in every hallway, bigger than me at the second dinner when Bake pointed at the chair beside him and she did not sit, bigger than me on the staircase, bigger than me right now in this room at 3 in the morning, standing in a shop I have never entered. His voice did not rise. I fired her because I could not stand next to her without shrinking. I fired her because when Bake pointed at her, every man in my organization looked at me to see what I would do, and I did nothing, because whatever I did would be smaller than what she would do. I sent her away because I could not bear to be small in front of my men, and in her absence I have become smaller than I have ever been. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, something in the eyes had cleared. He walked back to the desk, slid the signet ring onto the middle finger of his right hand, and sat down. He did not sleep. He waited for morning. At 9:05 he walked into the small conference room where his 3 division heads sat with coffee and folders. They rose. He waved them down. He set his palms flat on the wood. Gentlemen, in the last 3 weeks I have made a series of tactical errors. I want to name them aloud in this room, and I want you to hear me name them, and I want it understood the errors were mine and not yours. He named them. He named the routing clause he had failed to read on page 11, and that his own maid had caught with one glance. He named the 6 weeks of silence in which he had chosen not to promote her, not to acknowledge her, because silence had felt like respect, and had in fact been fear. He named the second dinner and Bake's pointing finger. He named the parlor and the words he had spoken in it. He named the staircase. He named each error in order, and at the end of each he said, "That was mine." "Yesterday afternoon," he said, Baek Do-yoon sent 2 of his enforcers to Miss Thorne's place of business. She responded with 3 sentences, a cup of cold coffee, and a suggestion of coffee hours on Tuesday. They left. No violence, no injuries. She did this alone. She did it without protection from any house. She did it because she is the size she is. He looked at each man in turn. "I am going to walk to Miss Thorne's office this afternoon. I am going to ask her to accept a proposal. The nature is not the business of this table. The fact of the walk is, I will be accompanied by Han Ji-woo and 4 men of his choosing. Every eye in Koreatown will see us walk. Every eye will understand what it means. I am telling you now, before we walk, so that no man in this organization can later say he was not told." The 3 men said nothing, which was the correct thing to say. That is all. They rose, they bowed, they left. At 2 in the afternoon, Kang Suk-jin stepped out of the front door of the mansion in a dark charcoal 3-piece suit, razor-tailored to the shoulder, matte silk dark tie fully knotted, mirror-polished Oxfords, the koi curling up the left side of his neck above the collar, the signet ring on the middle finger of his right hand. Han Ji-woo was on his left. 4 men in dark coats walked 2 paces behind. They did not take a car. They walked. They walked down through the East 60s into the 50s into the 40s. They walked past doormen who lifted their caps. They walked past a coffee cart whose owner set down his mug without meaning to. They walked past the plate glass window of a Korean bank whose junior manager, seeing them through the glass, picked up his desk phone and called someone senior and did not speak into it for a full 30 seconds because he did not yet know what to say. They walked past a fish market where an old man in a rubber apron paused with a bluefish in his hand and stood watching them pass. And after they had passed, he set the bluefish down on the ice and walked to the back and put on a clean shirt, though he did not know why. They crossed 5th into the 40s. They crossed 6th. They crossed 7th. They crossed into the 30s and turned west, and the awnings began to carry gold characters, and the smell of the street changed from perfume to garlic and sesame and coffee, and by the time they had walked 3 blocks into Koreatown, the word had run ahead of them, from doorway to doorway, in Korean and in English, and in the private glances that pass between shopkeepers who have known each other 20 years, and the shopkeepers who had spent the last 3 weeks not looking at Thorne Reed's began, one by one, to step out onto the sidewalk to look at Kang Suk-jin walking toward it. He stopped at the door of Thorne Reed's at 2:31. He did not send Ji-woo in first. He opened the door himself. The small brass bell rang once, cleanly. Vivian was seated at the small round table, the yellow pad in front of her, the blue pen resting across it at a perfect diagonal. The chair opposite her was empty. She did not rise. "Mr. Kang." "Miss Thorne." She gestured, with 2 fingers, at the empty chair. He did not sit. He walked, instead, to a spot 2 feet in front of her table, and he stopped there, and for a moment he stood, and then he lowered himself onto both knees onto the wood floor of Thorne Reed's, in his dark charcoal 3-piece suit, razor-tailored to the shoulder, and he did not speak. Behind him, Han Ji-woo did not move. The 4 men in dark coats did not move. Outside the door, on the sidewalk of West 32nd Street, the shopkeepers who had stepped out to look did not move. In Korean underworld tradition, no boss kneels. Not to his father, not to his sworn brother, not to God. It is the one rule that has held for 4 generations of syndicates in 3 cities. Kang Suk-jin, at 2:31 on a Thursday afternoon in Koreatown, broke it. He spoke, quietly. "Miss Thorne, I did not come to offer you employment. I did not come to offer you a title. I came to offer you my name. I am asking you to marry me, not as apology, not as payment, as acknowledgement. I know what I did. I know why I did it. I know the size of you, and I know the size of me. I have come here on my knees in front of my men because it is the only posture in which the truth of the last 3 weeks is legible. Please." Vivian looked at him a long moment. Her mouth rested in its faint, natural half-smile. Her hands stayed folded on the yellow pad. Behind her, the amber light coming through the window fell across her hair, across the loose, defined curls on the left and the fine, tight braids on the right, across the thin gold chain at her throat. She spoke without raising her voice. "Stand up, Mr. Kang." He did not move. "Stand up, Mr. Kang," she said again. "I am not going to accept a proposal made from the floor of my office. Not because I do not respect what you did to get onto the floor. I do. But because if I say yes to you kneeling, then for the rest of our lives you will believe you paid your debt at 2:31 on a Thursday afternoon, and I will believe I bought my dignity for the price of a bent knee, and neither of those things is true." He stood. "Sit down." He sat. He set his palms flat on the round table on either side of the yellow pad, in the same posture in which she had watched Cho Min-sok lean the day before. She looked at him. "Now, in front of Mr. Han and the 4 men on the sidewalk, please name aloud the reason you fired me." Kang Seok-jin did not look away. He spoke without pause. "I fired you because you were bigger than me, and I could not bear to be seen as smaller than you by the men in my organization. I fired you out of fear. Fear of your size. Not fear of your knowledge. Fear of your size. Louder, Mr. Kang, so the men outside can hear." He repeated it, louder. The men on the sidewalk heard. Han Ji-woo heard. The shopkeepers heard. Vivian nodded once. "Now my terms. I am not saying yes today. I am not saying no. Tomorrow morning at 10:05 you will come back to this door. Alone. No suit, no men, no signet ring, no crown of any kind. You will wear the plainest clothes you own. You will walk here, you will knock once, and when I open the door, we will begin, not the marriage, but the conversation that decides whether there will ever be one. Do you agree?" "I agree." "Then go, Mr. Kang." He rose. He bowed, slightly at the waist, and walked to the door. He opened it. He stepped out onto the sidewalk into the amber light where Han Ji-woo and the 4 men waited. He closed the door behind him with the soft click of a man who had been taught, somewhere, that doors are closed and not slammed. The small brass bell rang once, cleanly. Vivian sat alone at the small round table in her sunlit office. She did not smile. She did not weep. She reached for the blue pen and picked it up and turned it once in her fingers, and set it back down across the yellow pad at a perfect diagonal, and she looked out through the window at the Koreatown afternoon where the shopkeepers were beginning, one by one, to return to their doorways, and she sat in her chair with her power whole in her hands, unspent, waiting for 10:05 in the morning. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever read a page nobody thought you could read and stayed silent because speaking would cost you the roof over your head? Have you ever been fired by someone who was actually afraid of you and only realized it years later when they came back on their knees? Would you have said stand up, or would you have said yes? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, silence, and awakening, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.